everybody. Welcome to Revival Town Podcast. I'm Chuck Tate. That's Andy King.
How you doing, mate?
Doing great, mate. How you doing?
Good, good. Hey, now, there's been a lot of crazy things going on around here, but you started telling me the other day a really crazy story that before we get into what we're about to do, you have got to tell the world about this.
All right. So there is a chance
Yeah.
that you and I could be related.
Sounds a bit of a nightmare to me.
Oh, well, you are full-blown English. You're from...
Actually, so I am... Yes, I was born in England,
Yeah.
but my dad is Welsh.
Okay.
So,
you, yeah.
there's a bit of,
Yeah.
weirdness there.
100% UK.
100%
UK.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm 50% Swede.
Right,
My mom
right.
is Swedish. My
Yeah.
grandparents were from Sweden. I found out not too long ago that a big portion of my dad, I don't know the percentage, but it's a high percentage, is English.
See, I knew there was something good about you.
Right. So my dad's, I almost said maiden name. My grandma, both of my grandparents on my dad's side are passed, but his mom, my grandma's maiden name was King. So my great grandfather, Floyd King. So my dad is Chuck Tate as well. We have different middle names. I'm Eric. He's Floyd.
Okay.
I'm Charles Eric. He's Charles Floyd. Because my great grandpa, was Floyd King.
Okay.
And
All
he
right.
was related to King George VI, who was Queen Elizabeth's father.
I want to see the records of this.
I know. So I'm going to try to. So my uncle has done this study of genealogy.
Yeah.
Of our family history. I'm going to get it.
Okay.
And we're going to verify this.
We need to verify this.
sometime.
We need to fact check it.
Sometime. Yeah. Before the end of the year.
Yeah.
After it's fact checked.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be wild? How crazy would it be if we were related?
Oh, it sounds
Kings.
great.
My great grandparents were kings.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is well, let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see if
Hey.
we can dig that up.
All right. So speaking of crazy, we have something else crazy to talk about.
We have, and how do we go into this? Because we just come off of 200th episode just a few weeks ago.
Right. So 4 years.
4 years of doing this,
Yes.
and so we decided this fall. So we decided for the next 4 weeks, we are going to pull together some of our favorite interviews, as well as some of the most listened to and watched.
Right. A combination.
And we're going to bring some combinations together. Right.
Yeah.
So are we
Yeah.
going to tell everyone what it is? I think we do, right?
Yeah, I think we do. We do tell them.
Why don't you
We've been
do the
doing this
fir- you
four
do-
years, so
yeah.
we're taking a little bit of a break in August.
Yeah.
And we're going to replay 4 episodes that were either in our top 10
Yeah.
or were meaningful to us.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So should we give the lineup?
Yeah, you go first.
All right, because this is the same intro for these 4 weeks in August.
Yeah.
So our very first guest is someone who is close to me, big part of my writing journey.
Yeah.
It's my literary agent, Esther Fedorkevich.
Yeah. So we're going to have her on this episode that you're about to listen to, although if you're listening to others, there's going to be other ones. So you're going to be messed up.
Yeah, and she's responsible for my new book that's releasing in January, and it is available for pre-order right now on Amazon.
Oh, look at that plug.
Man,
Look at
boom!
that plug.
Boom!
So then the second one that we're going to be doing is we are going to have J.D. Walt and Zach
Merkreeves.
I knew I was
Merkreeves,
gonna-
yeah.
who was the gentleman who spoke, and the Asbury revival literally started after he did the altar call, basically.
Right.
And so JD was a part of that. That was a hugely
He helps steward it.
hugely watched and listened to episode. And so we're bringing them together.
And Zach has a new book coming out on the same day as mine.
Yeah.
And it's called Lower.
Oh, okay, good.
So his might be lower No, I'm kidding. No.
So that's
how cool was that?
So what's the third one?
The third one is a combination of all things Delirious.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a good one.
Yes, because we've had three people from the band.
Yeah,
that was Delirious.
Yeah.
And we're going to put all three of them together.
Yeah, so that will be put together, and then the last one, which is the most watched and listened to show that we've ever had.
It's our number one episode in 4 years.
Number one is when we had Amy Grant on at Christmas, and that was a real good episode. Obviously, I had known her for a while, but first time you had spoke to her, and you were totally blown away by just the openness of her.
Yeah, I was pretty nervous. I don't get nervous a whole lot talking to people, but I was nervous going into that interview.
Yeah.
And I came out just in awe. And I think the best word to sum up that episode is magical.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was special.
It was a great conversation with Amy Grant. And so if you have listened to all four, in the past, why don't you still just sit back and relax and enjoy these conversations over the next 4 weeks, and then we will be back the first week of September with brand new episodes. And we have got some really good people lined up for the fall into next year as well. So but why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy these conversations from Revival Town Podcast.
This podcast is part of the Edify Podcast Network. Edify is a faith-inspiring app that brings together thousands of the best Christian podcasts in one place for your listening enjoyment. Cut through the noise and grow your faith by diving into the world's top Christian podcasts today. Download the Edify app for free from the App Store or Google Play, or by going to edify.app. That's edifi.app.
This has been one that I've been waiting for, because the gentleman that we've got on hasn't just made history. He really has made history, but also with what he's doing now is making history in England and in the UK. So we'll be talking to Tim Jupp in just a little while. Yeah. But Chuck, how are you? Seriously, this guy looks amazing. Is it something like, have you got a new beard oil or what?
Okay, oh my goodness, I colored my beard last night. Oh, for real? I did, man. I colored my beard last night, so I guess it's standing out. And even though I have longer hair, it is getting thinner on top. But there's product for that, so
yeah.
You know,
amazing product.
Yeah. It includes glue and no. Oh man, we have a good time. And no, seriously, this interview that we did was just inspiring. I had never met our guest prior to today, and really impressed with his humility, his love for Jesus, his love for the local church really stood out to me as a pastor. And of course, to hear some of the stories, you guys are going to love this.
Yeah, and you'll get to meet Tim Jupp in just a little while. He was the keyboard player for Delirious, the worship band Delirious, but now is doing a movement. It really is a movement called Big Church Day Out, and over 30,000 people are going to this prior to COVID. He'll be talking about that journey as well. But yeah, so we got to hang with Tim for just a little while. Boy,
gotta love technology.
Yeah, even during COVID.
Yeah,
we can still do this.
It was cool. It was a cool experience, and I got to admit, I did struggle a little bit with his English accent. I have yours down, but his was a little bit stronger, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit. And also,
I felt like, man, I almost out of place.
Of course, you were out of place,
right?
I mean, what more? You know what? You had 2 against 1 today.
2 against 1. Next time, I'm going to drink tea if we do that.
Oh man, I tell you what, the response to people listening to the podcast has been amazing. We were into a few episodes here, and if you are listening for the first time,
welcome.
But make sure that you're checking us out on social media at Revival Town Podcast. We've got the website up and running as well. as well as all the socials.
And subscribe.
Subscribe. That's big. Wherever you listen to podcasts.
And if you feel like it, give us a 5-star rating, because that helps extend our reach as well. We want to be able to share this message with the masses.
And we have some amazing interviews coming up. We have been reaching out to a lot of people, and are responding back.
Only a couple restraining orders. Besides that, man, it is looking good.
Yeah, I don't like it when you go to the house, Chuck, and
I'm with beard oil. We gotta get Crowder on here.
Oh, come on, that's right. There's the beard of all beards, right there. Hey, well, you know what? Let's get right into this interview. I do think people are going to really enjoy this. So sit back and relax to this interview with Tim G. Well, Chuck, I have a friend on Zoom, obviously, with what we're doing. A lot of the interviews are via Zoom, but this is a friend of mine who I've known for, probably 15 years now. He was in a worship band that most people know about, a band called Delirious.
Yeah, I love Delirious. In fact, their song Obsession is still in our rotation for our worship set.
Oh, yeah. And Kerry Job just did a bit of a rendition of it.
Yes, in fact, when you showed it to me, we did it at church that weekend. Oh, how cool is that?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, we have with us Tim Jupp, who is... okay, Tim, I know the other guys in Delirious wouldn't say this, but I would say you were the backbone of that band. Because you just...
Is that a compliment, or is that, I don't know how to say that?
Because you knew how to lay the pad. I mean, honestly, Chuck, when we started doing a lot of the Delirious stuff at different churches and things like that, like the sound was so new because of this big pad that would be in the background. You think of, did you hear the mountains? Did you see the mountains tremble? And it's that boom at the beginning.
Yes.
Tim was the guy who bought that boom.
Tim, it's an honor. Nice to meet you.
It's my honor to be with you guys. I can't believe it after all these years.
And you guys came to Peoria 3 times, and we had some incredible times, Tim. I remember you would do it as the kids tour, where you would bring the kids with you and the family, the wives as well. I think it was like 38 people would be on that tour, something like that.
It was crazy. I do remember that. We didn't really come to play, as you know. We just came to the roast dinners.
Oh, that's it. We would look after you with the roast dinners.
Yeah, that's what we were there for.
And then they played some music at night, so it was great. Well, we thought we would catch up with Tim because obviously a few years ago Delirious ended, but that started a new chapter in Tim's life. So we're going to be talking about that because that's become a massive movement in Europe, Chuck, with what Tim and his team have been doing. But Tim, let's go back a bit. Can you tell us a little bit about your family? Not even Delirious World, but just where you're at right now. Obviously, you have an accent, so you are not from around these parts. Tell us a little bit about into the life of Tim Jupp and family life.
Well, I live on the south coast of England. So if you imagine where London is on a map and you kind of draw a line and come down as far as you can go. If you went, that's where we live. If you went any further, you'd be in France.
Okay.
And I'm married to Becca, and Becca is the senior pastor of the church in our town. And that's the same church that Delirious were in for all those years that we were going.
So, yeah, let's pause there. Chuck, I don't know if you caught that, but Tim's wife is the senior pastor of the church that Delirious came from.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, before that, when Delirious were rolling, it was your father-in-law in charge of the church, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't think he ever believed in women in ministry at the time. So God kind of cornered him at one point,
Yeah.
and he ended up handing the church over to his daughter.
That is amazing.
Becca's been leading the church for like, she was on the eldership for like 15 years, and then took the church on from her dad, and she's led it for 10 years now.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. And doing an amazing job. Obviously, through COVID, what I have enjoyed is being able to click into different churches and see what's going on. And I messaged Becca a few weeks ago just saying how I loved the service. And then tell us a little bit. I don't know if you have much to do with these guys, but is it King's Village? Are they guys that are out of your church, this new worship sound that's coming out of the UK?
Yeah, that's a worship team that's really the worship team from our own church. So they kind of got a little bit of the DNA of Delirious in them. Yeah. It's another generation, and they're two of our worship leaders who are writing songs, and the songs are starting to get out there a bit. So that's exciting to see that happen again, and this time play more like the fatherly role in it, rather than...
Do you ever go in and say, hey, can we put a little bit of a better pad in that, a little bit more of keys in there? I mean,
I keep out of it. I can't keep up with what they're doing. I mean, there's another thing that they're up to playing wise, and it's great. They're doing really good. I think it's a hard thing though these days in the UK. We don't really have much of a kind of Christian music scene as such.
Right.
And back in the day with Delirious, there's a different thing back there. We sold records. We got to travel to America. It was $2 to the pound, and it kind of worked.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a different time now for these guys.
What was that like, Tim, when Delirious was starting off? Tell us a little bit about the movement that started Delirious. What was that like?
Well, we started back in the early 90s, and we used to gather kids in our small town, and it was a real one-horse seaside town. We live in only 30,000 people. Oh. And we used to gather these kids, and after about a year or so, we had about 1,300 young people coming every month. And then we started doing it in the next town along, and then the next town along the coast. And after a couple of years, we were gathering about 3,000 young people every month. Man. In these locations, and they would just come for 2 hours and worship together. And in the summertime, we'd get them all together and we'd do something on the beach where we lived. And about 10,000 people used to turn up. And that was amazing when I look back, because that was like before we had any internet, any social media. It was all just kind of word of mouth, and people would turn up on the beach on this one Sunday in July, gather and worship, and we used to give the gospel. People gave their lives to Jesus, and we just took them straight in the sea and baptized them.
Oh man!
I'm not sure about the theology on that, but it says believe and be baptized, doesn't it? So we just went for it.
Yeah, yeah,
it's remarkable.
And from that, the Live in a Can CD project came out, which I'll always remember. I'll always remember receiving that in the mail. It was a CD that, I mean, you guys, the way you marketed everything, you were ahead of your time on so much. But the CD came in a boot polish can, like, when you'd have shoes and you'd have a boot polish, and it'd even have these little on the side. It said "Unseal for the Spirit." And you'd pull. And I mean, the way it was done, Tim, back then. I mean, obviously, there was no big record companies back then that you were really working with. You guys, it was a real homegrown type of thing. How was that? Trying to just get this music out. It was very organic for the concert or the worship experience type of thing. But now getting the music out in mass, and like you said, back then, no internet, no
social media.
Yeah, nothing like that. What was that like, Tim?
We just kind of followed the songs, really. I mean, that record you talked about, we did think it was a clever idea at the time, sticking a CD in a tin can, until we got to the US and realised in the can meant something else. So we weren't quite as clever as we thought we'd be on that one. And so we did stick it out in America Starring in the Tin Cat. And that particular record was recorded live. We used to take a machine on the road because things were so spontaneous in those days. You never knew what was going to happen next, and God would show up in these times of worship. And we thought, goodness, if we don't start documenting what was going on and keeping a record list, we're going to kind of miss this moment. So, you know, if anyone's never really heard Delirious, that live and in the can record, you'll probably find it on, you know, Spotify and things like that.
Yeah.
That does document live for us 25 years ago in the early to mid 90s, and it kind of is almost the story of what God was doing back then. And really, you know, what happens is the songs just kind of travelled, and we were like a nomadic group of people who followed the songs around, kind of wherever they went. It was a little bit like that. I think it's kind of back to front because a lot of bands set out as a band and they try and get shows and play gigs in places to promote their songs. Well, our songs got there long before we ever did.
Yeah.
And we just kind of followed them wherever they went.
So Tim, I have a question for you. Obviously, you guys were ahead of your time, and things were so much different back then without social media, like we just mentioned. When people would buy a record, they would go to a music store and they would preview it. I would go and I would put headphones on. I would sit at a little listening station. I'm like, oh man, I'm checking out the new Delirious. That was the way that I was able to sample it. And of course, obviously as a fan, I didn't even have to sample it. If it was new, I was going to buy it. But I always went to a record store to purchase a record. And you guys just blew it up, not just there, but here in the States. And the music industry has changed so much now. It's all about, I mean, everything's just is digital. How was that affected you as a musician?
Well, towards the latter end, obviously the band working, that did affect us in terms of what we could and couldn't do because, you know, we're guys who really believed in local church. So on the face of it, it looked like we were always somewhere in the world every Sunday. But the truth was 3 out of 4 Sundays we were usually back in our own church.
Right.
And travelling often during the week. And we did fund that operation because we used to sell records, but then everything went to digital. And so then there became a real pressure to travel even more. And it was always difficult. And then it was a never-ending conversation with the 5 of us about how much should we go away from home. And I think we had 16 kids between us. Wow. And I think being in a band is definitely a job for a single guy.
Yeah.
You know, for family guys, the kids, a lot of challenges.
Can you just speak into that, Tim, because you mentioned family. This is one of the things that, for us as a family, we loved about you guys. You had some rules with regards to travel. First off, I think you need to explain, when we say family, can you explain the family dynamic within Delirious, because people may not understand how entwined your families were.
Okay, you'll have to follow this. There were 5 guys in Delirious. The youngest was John, who was the bass player. John has 3 sisters, and 3 of us were married to his sisters. Of course, I was married to the best sister, and still am. And then we had Stu, who was the drummer, married to another sister, and then Martin, who wrote the songs and fronted things up in the band, he was married to another sister. So I guess 4 out of the 5 of us were brothers-in-law, and then we had Stu G, who was a guitar player. God bless him, not related to anyone. Lucky guy.
Yeah,
I reckon.
I'll tell you this. When I was in Nashville, you know, I would hang a little bit with Stu, and I said, "How was the break?"
You guys are frozen.
Oh, am I? Oh, we're frozen.
Oh,
we good?
You're back.
Good.
Yeah, you're back.
I remember talking to Stu and saying, when I was in Nashville, I said, "Hey, how was the breakup?" And all he would say was, "Well, at least I wasn't in the family." And that's because it was so intertwined. But tell us a little bit then about your traveling. You wouldn't go for certain days. Tell us about how you really did protect family time.
But I think obviously with the kids, we want to protect the kids. I think we really believed in local church.
Yeah.
And I think we were really respectful and honoured, and we understood that, in fact, what God did with us came out of a commitment and seeing him move in local church.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to cling on to that. And of course, who wants to be apart from their kids? Who wants to be away from them? And, we missed a lot of birthdays. I think, thankfully, over the years, nobody missed the birth of any baby, but we certainly missed birthdays and everything. And we kind of, I say rules, but I would say it's more boundaries that we put in place where we wouldn't go away for more than 10 days at a time.
Right.
2 weekends, so we could always get home. Apart from once a year, of course, when we would come to the US and we would do a whole month. We'd take the kids out of school for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We'd have a 2-week Easter break. That gave us a month, and we would come every year to see you, Andy.
Yeah.
And stop off on that trip.
And
it was amazing.
We would
and every day, the Americans are just so hospitable and so kind wherever you went. And I can remember, people often waited months for you to turn up. And we were turning up with like 35 or more of us and 4 or 5 buses with all the children.
Yeah.
And people were so kind and generous. But I can remember every day they would give all these presents and stuff to the kids, and it would be like trays full of cupcakes and candy and like all this stuff every day. And what they didn't know is that every night the bus driver would have to pull over at the first truck stop and put all this stuff in the garbage, because it's like the next day you would turn up and you'd be given more. And you couldn't feed your kids on candy and cake for a month.
Yeah.
As kind as everybody was, we just didn't know what to do with it.
But the key for coming to Peoria was, Chuck, it wasn't just American candy that we would get them. We would literally fly in English chocolates, Cadbury's, and all the stuff that these kids would really love. So I know some of that stuff wasn't going in the garbage, because Cadbury's is totally different than American.
Now, you said that the bus driver's throwing it away. I don't think he really was. I think he had a stash somewhere.
I really think, he's probably still got it 20 years later. There was so much.
He's like, please let me drive for you guys again.
Man. Well, let me ask you this question, and we'll try and transition into what you're doing now. But a couple of things for those that don't know. Revival Town podcast is the name. I'm a massive Delirious fan. Chuck is a massive Delirious fan. And one of the songs that you guys do is Revival Town. Let me just play it a little bit so that the people can hear it. So you probably played that many times, Tim. I see you. What was the story a little bit behind that song?
That honestly was the story about Little Hampton. You'll have to Google Little Hampton in England, this tiny place that we live in. And there was so much passion for Jesus in these early gatherings when kids came together to worship. When there's like so much passion in the room, you're like, I don't think we can contain what God's doing in the room.
Right.
And we just felt like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Is this going to break out into the place that we live? Because it's not going to stay here in these 4 walls. Yeah. Meeting in a school hall once a month. And we just dreamt and imagined what would happen where we lived. And that was it.
And that's what happened.
Yeah. And so the song just says, Revival Town. That's what they're calling this place now. And we imagined that about happening where we live. And there was there's another song we did called I Found Jesus, and the lyric says, well, I hear they're singing on the street.
Right.
That Jesus is alive. And we were like, that's going to happen on our street, outside. And I guess because that was our prayer where we lived. Our prayer was that.
Man. And you really did see that explode. I mean, not just, again, for selling records' sake. It was a pure desire to see Jesus on the streets and see revival break out in the UK at that time. Because like you mentioned, back then there was no real Christian music industry. There was no Christian TV. There was no Christian bubble. It was purely what you guys were doing was to present Jesus in a new and a fresh way. And that just spread out across the world. And you got to do some crazy things with different people, opening for Bon Jovi, right? I mean, you got to do a Bon Jovi tour. You got to obviously play at places like Hillsong. You played Wembley Arena. What was some of the highlights there, Tim? What looking back, going, man, that was amazing. When we did that.
I think the highlights are probably the really big things and the really small things. And the highlights for me were also always the food, obviously. I can remember the food as much as the gigs, but I guess overall it's just so hard because the highlights were just the privilege of doing it all.
Yeah.
But when I look back, the fact that we opened up for Bon Jovi was really crazy, really, when you think about it. Because we really carried a lot of baggage with us in terms of everyone knew that we came out of the church.
Right.
Everyone that knew that's what we were about. So it was amazing that we got to do things like that. I mean, I can remember, I think the biggest crowd we ever played to was 1.5 million when we did something with the Pope.
Wow.
And it was kind of the most weird and wonderful experience all at the same time.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love the privilege of traveling everywhere. You know, we really kind of went around the world. I think what we found is that in terms of these big gatherings and, you know, what you find is wherever you go around the world, the church does love together and come together.
Amen.
And we really just went around the world helping facilitate a lot of large gatherings in the church. And back in that time, the only guys could do that, the only bands that kind of hold that crowd big enough were American bands and us, really.
Right.
And we were usually a bit more eager to travel than the Americans, so we got there first and ended up outside of the US, really. I guess it became like the biggest Christian band thing in the world, definitely outside of the US, because we were, you know, we're going to Asia 3 times a year, South America, China, Africa, all over the place, many different countries all year long.
Yeah, and you guys even, and I agree with that. I think you were big over here, but globally you were big. And if you look at a lot of the worship bands that are out now, bands like Mercy Me, bands like Hillsong United, they, in their documentaries, they will always reference being at a Delirious event or hearing Delirious for the first time, and that triggered them to step out.
Absolutely. I think Delirious was instrumental in launching the entire worship movement that is today.
Yeah, because it wasn't like what it is now. Like back, and this isn't a slam on back then, but worship music wasn't relevant. It was great for the church, and when you were in the church, it was relevant there. But to take it outside the walls, it just didn't fit. And Tim and you guys just really raised the bar and set a new standard for how worship can not only be great for the church, but outside the church. So we're thankful for that. And you guys had an amazing run. How many years was it, Tim, that you guys were going?
We did from start to finish altogether 17 years.
17 years, wow.
I served my sentence. Sure.
Yeah. But obviously, it came to an end. Do you want to just touch on how that happened? And obviously, you mentioned there was family involved. So, without being kicked out of the family, how did that all come down? And then we'll start talking about what you are doing now, because that really was a God thing that happened with the timing of everything. But how was that okay, we need to close this chapter?
Well, I think, we've done quite a lot of years, and there was a lot of pressure on travelling and being away from home. And one morning, Martin kind of woke up and just felt he was done, I think, and needed to hang his boots up.
Oh, by the way, hang his boots up. That's a soccer term.
Oh, that's an English thing.
Yeah, that's an English thing. We do a thing on this show called Tate and his mate, because Chuck Tate and me, I'm his mate, and I throw English words at him, and he has to try and guess what they are. And that was a great one for that. Hang his boots up. It's all about soccer. So. Sorry.
What's the American equivalent of that?
Hang their cleats up. Is that right?
Yeah.
Hang their cleats. Yep. They call their soccer boots cleats, which is really weird, Tim. But
Right.
So
I'm outnumbered.
But I guess what happens is we're in this band of 5 guys, and the truth is, you don't all wake up one morning and everyone thinks the same thing.
Right.
So then we had to work out, this is interesting. We've done this for years, and the one thing we've never done together is we've never finished it.
Yeah.
So that was a first for all of us. And then we had to work out how we did that thing.
Yeah.
And how we had to kind of wind it down. And, it wasn't easy at the end, because we were like this massive steam train going at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, to bring all that to a halt, quickly, was a difficult thing. So, and you have moments where you're feeling like you're falling off a cliff. And I tell you, it's great for us guys, because us guys, generally, we're pretty bad at, often we find our significance in who we are and what we do.
Right.
And so that really kind of asks questions about you and that stuff at that point in time when all that's taken away. So it was good, and it was a good experience, but we got through it, and still all friends. And I see Martin and I see Stu Smith all the time,
right?
Because they live around here, and they're my brothers-in-law. 2 of the other guys, Stu G and John, ended up in Nashville, so we see them less than we did before.
Now, I remember being over in the UK, and actually we were staying at Martin's home, and Martin was kind enough to tell all of you guys, hey, the King family are here, come over. And you guys came over for a Sunday afternoon. And I always remember playing soccer in his backyard with you guys. But then I sat down with you, and I remember saying, Tim, what are you going to do now? And this was about 6 or 8 months before Delirious was about to do their last gig in London. But you were about 2 to 3 weeks away from doing your first big church day out. And I remember you telling me this dream about how you wanted thousands of people to come together for like a family Christian music experience. I even remember you telling me about the flags that would line the field where this would happen. And you were about to step into something brand new. Even though Delirious was ending, it was as though God had planted something in you, and even some resources to be able to launch something. And now, many years later, Big Church Day Out in England and across Europe, it's the known thing. But back then, you were stepping out in faith. Tell us a bit about Big Church Day Out and what you do now, but back then, what it was like to step out in faith.
So the Big Church Day Out, and lots of people in the US would never heard of it, because most of the bands and in the Christian music thing will have heard, because most of them have been over at one point or other and played with it over the last few years, so they all know about it. But we gathered for 2 days in this country estate in the south of England, and people travel from all over the UK. It looks a bit like a festival, but really it's just a gathering of the wider church.
Yeah.
And we're together for 2 days. We love prayer. We love worship. We love hanging out together. It's diverse in its churchmanship. It's diverse in its age group. And there's about 30,000 people over 2 days. although I think when we come back after COVID, it'll be more like 40,000. I think the appetite for the church to gather will be huge.
Yeah, yeah.
And we just gather together, and really there's a very similar DNA to the Delirious thing. The thing that was always ran through Delirious is that, like, wherever we played, whether it was a small club or a big worship celebration, you know, the prayer when we gathered before playing would be always that we would want the presence of God to come and really impact people's lives. And that's the thing that's the same about Big Church Day Out, is that we just create a space for the church, and the prayer is that the presence of God comes and changes people's lives.
Yeah.
And so the event started in 2009, and never dreamt for one moment that this far on we'll still be gathering.
Yeah.
Not only gathering, it's like you say, it's become the largest kind of church thing in Europe right now, and that meets every year, and it's an amazing thing. And the outcome, you know, the narrative has been we want to create a space to demonstrate the unity in the church, but the outcome has been it's become incredibly evangelistic.
Right.
So, like, people are bringing their families, their mates, a lot of husbands come and don't go with their wives to church, and people are bringing their friends, and people are finding Jesus and meeting Jesus for the first time.
Wow.
And it's been an amazing outcome.
Man. And so obviously bringing 30,000 people together. And Chuck, I don't know if you've ever just looked online at some of the artists that go to Big Church Day Out. When Tim says most American bands know about it, like everyone that is a name in the US band-wise, they're fighting to play at this event. Like from Switchfoot to King and Country, to obviously Martin has played at it. Kerry Job was at. I mean, like anyone that is anyone is they. This is where they want to go.
Play.
Yeah, and so then obviously that brings a crowd, which is absolutely amazing until the country is shut down with COVID.
Yeah.
So Tim, tell us about how your year has been with this, and you do not just the Big Church Day Out, but the Big Church Night Ins as well, and the tours and things like that. But you can't do any of that. So
No, we can't do anything. So we also do a few tours during the year where, mainly for the US bands really, where they want to come and play. It's not something we go looking for, but the guys in the US who want to come and travel, see a bit more of the UK, we can usually help facilitate the tour for them. But like everything else in those big spaces, you know, we got shut down. I guess the big event world kind of had its legs chopped off early doors with the whole COVID thing, often before other things got shut down.
yeah,
Our event happens at the end of May every year, and we kind of shut it down by the middle of March this year.
Yeah.
I found an email last week from a manager of an American artist that everyone would know. And I wrote to him in the middle of the March and said, we've cancelled, and sorry, you can't come. And I found the email, and he wrote back, and he was really mad with me. He's furious. He said, what are you doing, man? He said, man, it'd be fine. It'd be all over by the end of April.
Oh.
He says, why are you cancelling your event? It's not going to be a problem. And I think at the time, I probably thought, yeah, you could be right. Have we done the wrong thing here? This seems ridiculous that we could cancel this for a virus.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at not even doing it next year. So it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's crazy. This week I've been working with Amy Grant a little bit on some things that we're doing. She's a close friend in Nashville, and I was just talking to her. She's just had heart surgery, which was a great time to have heart surgery because she wasn't on the road. But she was like, Andy, they've told us there's going to be no events until the end of summer next year at least. And she said the music industry will be the last industry to go back because people can't gather.
Yeah.
And I how have you got, because you have a staff and everything, right, Tim? I mean, it's not like just you booking everyone. I mean, you have a staff, and how has that been for you trying to manage what God's given you, but also how to look after people's lives and livelihoods and things like that?
Yeah, well, we're not a big team. We have about 15 full-time staff.
Okay.
We did, but we're now down to 2, so everyone lost their jobs straight away.
Wow.
That's really difficult. 2 of them were my own kids.
Right.
One was about to get married. One was about to leave and have a first baby.
Oh, mate.
So you can call me Grandpa if you like.
Okay, Grandad. All right, mate.
Yeah. So, making your own kids redundant, it's never a pleasure, is it? Anything like that. And we were 3/4 of the way through our year, so we spent a lot of money on salaries and paying people, on marketing costs, some of the costs of running our operation. Right. So and it was all money that we could never recover without an event to happen at the end.
Right.
And so we just had to get on our knees and pray and say, God, well, you need to help us here, because unless we can recover that, we'll never be in a position to go again. And thankfully, within just a few weeks, everything got recovered. It was amazing.
Wow.
For us. So I think God's kind, and I think it shows that people in the UK are really committed to this vision of this space for the church together. So that's been an exciting thing to see people's commitment. And not right now, we're waiting. And I think we have to remember at the end of the day, things like Big Church Day Out and these conferences and all these things that we all run, they're only events.
Right.
And it's fine. And the world will be fine without events for a year or 2.
Right.
Because our hope isn't in an event. Our hope is in the church.
Right. Right.
And the church is going nowhere, right?
That's right.
So it's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. But it's going to be exciting when we come back.
Absolutely. And I love hearing your faith of just saying 40,000 are going to come back. Like it's people, and you're right. There are people who are waiting for that green light to okay, let's go. Let's get back to normal. There may be some changes a little bit, but for sure. Chuck, you got anything for Tim? Because I know we've talked a lot about Tim and Delirious, and Big Church Day Out's a big deal.
Man, yeah. For one, Tim, I love your heart. Obviously, I don't know you, and met you just during this podcast, and I love your heart and the humility, and your wife is a senior pastor, and I've planted a church 22 years ago. And I guess my question for you, and then we'd love to have you maybe close us out in prayer.
That'd be awesome.
And then I have a couple of random questions for you after that. But oftentimes my wife has been asked throughout the years, so what do you do? Obviously, the role is somewhat reversed with you and your wife. So what does your role look like in the church that she is leading, and that you're right there, partners leading together? And I think sometimes there is a misunderstanding in ministry that the spouse doesn't do anything, and and that could not be further from the truth. So how is it, as far as your church leadership and your wife, the senior pastor, and your role? Can you maybe expound on that just a little bit before we close out in prayer?
Well, I try and keep my head low as much as I can. But I feel like what I'm doing is great fun, and we love what we're doing. And I think, goodness me, Chuck, you leading a local church, hats off to you. All respect, because that is such a hard job, and I think the patience that you pastors have and leaders have is absolutely incredible. And I think, as the spouse of a leader of the church, you live in this kind of almost at times terrible tension and paradox of, on one hand, I want to support my wife in everything that God's called her to do and encourage her and push her on. And on the other hand, you spend half your life feeling you want to protect her from all that she has to carry and the difficulty of it all. And it's never, and I think it's such a difficult thing, isn't it? And you carry both these things all the time. And, and I don't want to tread on her toes either in terms of what she's doing, because she's clearly called to lead the church. That's not the calling on me at all.
Right.
But I guess my place is just to try and be the best husband I can in it, to encourage her. And it's not easy being a woman leader in the church too.
Right.
You know, it has some challenges. And in fact, we were looking at a thing this week. She's part of a forum of. There's a group where 60 of the largest churches in the UK gather on the leadership thing, and we're included in that. We're not a big church; we're about 400 or 500, but in UK size, that's it's a good medium-sized church.
Sure.
And of those 60 churches, she's part of that network. She's the only senior leader who's a woman.
Wow.
So can you imagine that? It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
In this day and age. So she does an amazing job, and not only that, spends a lot of time mentoring other women in leadership.
Yeah. Man.
So
Lord,
I think what you guys do is an unbelievable thing. I think I have an easy job compared to leading local church. And then not only that, what you're all having to do to lead it through these unprecedented times, because none of you trained for this.
Right.
For sure, none of you knew this was going to happen. And so to keep those people connected, I think our focus right now in church locally is all about that. We do online content, we do online service, but that's just a mere tip of the iceberg. Our focus and attention is all about keeping the family, the community we have connected together. And so that's what we're really building on and focusing on.
Amen.
And, like I say, I think confidence you have is that, the hope is in the local church, isn't it?
Amen.
And this will pass, and the church will still be here. And I think, goodness me, I think, political systems come and go, and economic systems come and go over centuries and over decades, and the church remains, and we're going to be here long after all those things are gone.
Amen.
So
Amen. Well, this has been so good.
Yeah.
So Tim, Andy, can you close us out in prayer, Tim, and pray for those that are struggling during this unprecedented time? There obviously are a lot of people that are hurting, are struggling. Some places are opening back up, some are shutting down again, and there's just so many unknown variables, but God is in control, and he's going to see us through. So can you pray for those that especially are struggling?
Yeah, and I just think as we pray, I think, one of the things I learned a long time ago is when things get tough, there's a really great question to ask ourselves, and that's what really matters here. What really matters here. And I think when we ask that question about the pandemic and all we're going through, if you say what really matters here, and I think what really matters is that, Jesus is the thing that really matters in it all. Yeah. So, Father, I pray for Chuck and for Andy, and I pray for ourselves back here in the UK. And I pray for all the people listening to this podcast, that through this incredible roller coaster of a ride that we're all going through the times of unprecedented uncertainty and not knowing, that you remain so constant, and that your mercies are new every morning. We thank you, Jesus, that you remain there for us at all times, and we thank you that your church remains. We thank you that we have something to cling on to, both in our personal relationship with you and the community you created called church. And we love the church, and we thank you for it at this time. And so, God, be with us. We thank you, God, that, also in this time, maybe sometimes we get even a bit more space in our lives just to know your closeness to us. And I pray for everyone listening that we will know you close, and be with us over these next few months as we get out of this. And we thank you, God, that that this will come to an end. We thank you and pray for that. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. That's good stuff.
That's good. Tim, we just want to thank you for taking the time. And I know you are a very busy guy, especially trying to figure everything out.
I'm not at the minute.
All right, so we'll stay on for another hour. No, I'm only joking. But Chuck, you said you had a couple of things, right?
Yeah. So we like to switch gears here, and I'm just going to ask you three random questions, and then we will. You can tell everybody how they can connect with you. But first question is this: what is your all-time favorite Delirious song? All-time favorite song?
I think you actually named it, Chuck, earlier on. It's Obsession.
All right.
That is mine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard Kerry Job's new, like, the chorus bit in her live set, Tim, recently?
I'm going to check that out.
It is brilliant. It's on a new album, but they only went to record one song, and they actually ended up recording three. Two were spontaneous, and one was Cody Carnes, her husband, led into My Heart Burns for You. And I mean, it's good. It's good. It refired the song in me, mate.
All right. Second question is this: would you rather travel to space or get in a submarine and go to the bottom of the ocean?
I'd love to go to space and look back on the Earth.
That'd be me.
Me
All
too.
Right, last question.
All right, last one. Have you ever had anything stolen?
I don't think I have. Oh, yes, I've had a car stolen.
Oh, mate, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I've had 3 cars stolen.
3?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different in England, Chuck.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, we always end with some 3 random questions, and you did pretty good on them. But in all seriousness, we want to thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your ministry over the years, and it's still going, the way you're impacting the church. I have family in England that go to Big Church Day Out, and they love it, and just keep pushing on. Even during these crazy times, we know, like you said, things will pass. Things are going to get back to normal, to where you'll be able to gather the church together and really make an impact. So, Tim, I thank you so much.
Thank you both. Great to
thank
see
you, Tim.
Thanks.
Great meeting you.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, everyone, it's time for another conversation on Revival Town Podcast. Our guest today, Stuart Smith, has an extensive design background and brings a wealth of experience from the commercial world with national and international brands as a creative director and strategic thinker. He has also pioneered within the music industry through his experiences traveling the world as the drummer with the band Delirious. After nearly 2 decades as a professional musician, Stu downed his sticks and returned to the creative world. Stu now heads up a Christian charity, CPO, and is creative director for a new vibrant agency, Common Good Studio, based on the south coast of the United Kingdom. Stu, welcome to Revival Town Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here, Stu. Just to give a bit of background, and I know people are probably like, they've had 4 out of 5 of Delirious on. And I actually got a bit of stick from Stu that he wasn't the first one that we interviewed.
Absolutely. I'm the drummer, the backbone of the unit. Everyone knows that. Everyone goes to see the drummer, not the band. The front man just delivers the vocal. Yeah, anyone can do that.
That's right.
We're actually having the tour bus driver on our next episode.
Yeah. Oh, now you're talking. Catering staff.
But in our house, Chuck, over the years that Delirious were a band, and you mentioned, Stu, about being the backbone, but at our house, Stu was the man. Right, not from me, but my boys, especially Ethan, who's gone on to drum and creative world, is in the creative world. But in our house, Stu Smith was the man. Like
top of the list,
pictures all over the wall. When we got to finally meet the guys, and they came to Peoria 3 or 4 times, and we went to create Cornerstone to see them. Like it with Ethan and Clay, it was. We don't really care about Martin. Where's Stu?
Absolutely. What great taste.
Yeah.
You've built brilliant character into your boys. I can tell. I always liked you the first time I saw you.
I know, see, there we go.
I knew you were a great judge of character. It's run through the family now.
I've still got the picture on my wall, but no. but seriously, Stu, for those who have listened to Delirious, Stu was just a solid, and he's mentioned solid backbone, beat wise, was always in the pocket. For musicians, you know what that means. And over the years, our family got the privilege to be able to get to know these guys off stage. And that's what really we fell in love with. Yeah, they were amazing on stage, but off stage, these guys are the real deal. Yeah. And we've had Tim and Martin and Stu G on already. So our listeners have seen and heard some of the stories. But Stu, we just thank you for coming on. But we wanted, for you, it was a little bit of a different journey. Obviously starting with the band early on, but you finished a little earlier before the band actually finished as a whole. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But how did you get involved with these crazy guys in Littlehampton many, many years ago?
Yeah. Well, I hope my story matches up with the three previous ones. It's always a risk coming on last. No, in fact, early days, I was doing the youth work with actually Tim's wife, Becca, who now leads the church, and we were chatting to the youth. And at the time, in the kind of early 90s, there was this kind of death of the rock band and sort of death of worship, and it was all about DJ and multimedia. We were just a little church on the south coast and didn't really have budgets or money, and so but our kids just said, can we just spend some time worshiping? And so we had about 40 kids in the youth group, and so that's what we did. And we were friends with Martin and obviously Tim and Stu a little bit later on, but through sort of being musicians and in the studio. So we said to Martin, do you want to come over and just play a few songs with us? We learned a few songs together, a few Kevin Prush songs and a little bit of this, a bit of that. And we just turned the lights off in this sort of drama studio in a local secondary school. And we had 75 kids turn up on the first time we did it. Back in the day, there was an overhead projector with the lyrics projected onto the wall. We decided we'd do this thing once a month. Second month, we had 150 kids turn up. Third month, we had 300. And it grew every month, it doubled. And so this event called Cutting Edge kind of was birthed. In time, as musicians, we were kind of learning to, what does it mean to be a worshipper, play music, lead people in worship, read the room. We did some crazy stuff. Crazy, but it wasn't just about the songs. It was about it really encountering God. Yeah. And that's what kind of spurred us on. And that was the sort of beauty and really back then, the real purity of what we were doing. And I guess that was the birth of Delirious, but it wasn't called Delirious then. It was just the Cutting Edge band, or the Cutting Edge event, really.
Yeah. And so from that, I know we had Martin on, and he was talking about when he had the car crash, which was a pretty pivotal time for you guys. Changing from Cutting Edge to, okay, we need to do this serious now, as far as full time, giving up work. Yeah. But for you with Delirious, you carried on your creative juices because you did a lot of the design work, correct?
Yeah. So I trained as a designer. Went to college, uni, did all that, and then worked for agencies. Worked for myself for a while as well. And funny enough, in fact, the day Martin had that car crash was the day my first child was born, Abby.
Oh, that's right.
And so
trying to get back to see.
He was getting back. Yeah. So I was there thinking, right, I'm a dad now. I need to be serious. I need to grow up a bit. And, Martin said, "Hey, Stu, give up your job. Let's go. Let's join a band. Let's make a band and tour the world." And I'm thinking, no, Mark, you've got it all wrong. I'm a dad, mate. It's like, it doesn't work like that. That isn't how it works. So we said, oh, well, let's not, rush into this. Let's give ourselves, a few months. And I was the slowest to respond. But so I was the sort of a bit lagging behind in that, because I actually had a really good career. Although at the time I was working for myself. I did a lot of work for the Body Shop, who were kind of international at the time, Anita Roddick. And I was earning, good money in the creative kind of world. And obviously that set me up for when we did go full time for, let's put all of our talents and gifting into a pot and kind of see what comes out. And that was obviously the musicianship kind of thing. And we were all at different levels within that.
Yeah.
But obviously you had Tim, who had a studio, a bit of more of a business kind of background, working in a bank before. Sure. You had Martin, was obviously songwriter, studio engineer, producer kind of thing. Stu G was guitaring, and also he sorted out all the lights in my house, which was handy. He was an electrician. Used to call him sausage fingers. Here comes sausage fingers. You'll never play the guitar with those on your hand, mate. Get rid of those sausage fingers. And John did a bit of web stuff, and he went into college on his first day of college and said, "Oh, I've been offered to join this band. Is it okay if I miss a few days at college?" And they said, no, it doesn't work like that. You've enrolled in college full time. He said, right, I'm leaving. And he left on the first day. That's rock and roll.
Yeah, rock and roll.
Yeah. So, but the creative really kind of stood us in good stead. Creativity isn't just a job either. It's like, I think all the guys are creative. They might not be able to draw or paint or take photographs, but I mean, obviously if you're a musician, there's a creative outlet. Yeah. But that kind of idea of creative thought process and what I would call conceptual thinking, dreaming up a different landscape that other people don't instantly see, is, I think, what set us apart from a lot of bands, and not just musically, but visually as well. We didn't have much money because we decided, well, we'll do this all ourselves. Why do we need a record label?
Right.
We can we can kind of do this ourselves. But what we did, we tried to do everything slightly different. So we always had special packaging if we could, and that didn't have to be expensive. Right. Sometimes, like, we did singles, and it was like, well, how can we make a single stand out on a radio pluggers or a DJ's desk when they're getting 100 singles a week kind of thing to listen through. So we did things like, well, we had a folded piece of plastic and we drilled a hole in it and put a massive bolt through it, and the CD bolted it in the middle, and they could never put it to the bottom of the pile. Oh. It always had to sit on the top of the pile because they couldn't do anything else with it. And the pluggers and the radio stations are saying, this is absolute genius. Like, why has anyone never thought of this before? It's always on the top, and we've played it because we want to get rid of the stupid thing.
Stu, let me ask you something. At what point early on did you know in your heart, we have something special? I mean, obviously John left school to do this, and at the beginning stages, I'm sure there were a lot of unknowns, but did you know at the beginning, we have something that is special, or did it take a while?
Yeah, from a musical, can you hear me okay? My headphones have just run out of battery, so it's shifted into normal audio. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. Just in case, testing, 1 2 1 2. I still got it.
Welcome to another conversation on Revival Town Podcast.
You don't get that sort of response with Martin when he's got proper mic and everything, do you? You're obviously talking to a creative now, with some old AirPods that are first generation, early adopter. I think it's different levels. I think we knew we were onto something really special even back in that drama studio because the presence of God was there.
Yes.
And that's the only reason we ever did what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so, but I think what happens is your kind of expectations grow as God allows you to see more.
Yeah.
And I think probably for me, a bit of a pivotal moment was we got invited to go and lead a conference in America, in San Luis Obispo, I don't know if the other guys have mentioned this, but and obviously for us, it was like, we have absolutely made it. We're getting paid to go to America to lead a conference, put up in a hotel in California.
Yeah.
And the nearer we got to the trip, we kept getting these kind of phone calls saying, we haven't really sold as many tickets as we thought, we've managed to get you in a house, the pastor's house kind of thing. You're not in a hotel. And we got there and there was like 10 people.
I think I was the youth pastor.
Yeah. And so the whole thing, and we'd packed like cases and cases of like cassettes in those days. We didn't even have CDs out. It was cassettes because we were like, well, there's going to be 1,000 people at this conference. So we were left with like cases. We lugged them, to America. We didn't know what to do with them. And one of the guys said, oh, let me just speak to my mate at Vineyard in California. And so they said, oh yeah, come and do some worship on the Friday night of the youth thing. So we got in the bands and trucked it down there, and it went really well, and they loved it. And they said, right on the spot, do you think you can come and play on a Sunday morning? And apparently then they'd never had anyone that wasn't internal lead worship ever in the whole history of Vineyard. Wow. And so there we were standing on stage behind the white curtain that parted. I mean, different world for us. We met in a school hall on the south coast of UK with 50 people or something, and there we were. And anyway, we said, look, it was great. We had a fantastic time. We said, look, we don't want to take these cassettes home. Just there you go. If you can sell them, let us know. If you sell them, and maybe send us a check if you can, kind of thing. If you can't, then just give them away or whatever. We don't want to take them home. And they sold out in a few days. Wow. And so they're phoning up and saying, it was sold out in a few days. And somehow the news got around. Somebody knew somebody who knew somebody, and EMI got in touch with us and said, look, we know you guys have been over. We've heard some of your music because someone gave us one of these cassettes. We're flying over next weekend. Do you want to have a chat about, being one of our artists? And I think that was the tipping point when we kind of thought, actually, God's doing something bigger than we probably ever dreamt. Yeah. We didn't intend to be a global worship band. We intended just to play worship music. Yeah. We didn't care who it was for or where it was. Yeah. And in those early days, it wasn't really about even being in a band and that kind of touring thing. It was more about creating this sense of community and purpose and commonality. Yeah. And so, in fact, for about a year, 2 years, we didn't do any one-off gigs. We just refused to do them. We would only go and play to places that had us on kind of once a month, so that we could invest into people, into a group of people, and we could go on a journey together. Yeah. And so obviously that changed as kind of the dynamics of being on the road and stuff just changes, because you just can't do that forever. Right. But that was our kind of early days and kind of thoughts of where we were. And obviously the other thing is that the face of Christian music and worship music massively changed. I remember going into one of the A&R guys, and he's like, I don't know where you sit, this happy song. It's not really CCM, is it? It's like, yeah, you'll never become famous being a worship band. It will never catch on. Wow. One of the labels, and we were like, that's fine. It doesn't matter to us. We're not doing it because we want to be famous or make money. Right. And obviously, the whole market has shifted, particularly in America.
Yeah. Now let's talk about America, because, I remember having many conversations with you guys just on how great it was being in America, but very hard when it came to the music industry. And like you said, you didn't fit, right? Your sound was completely different than what was out. And I even remember the conversation that with Martin about you guys turned down some major tours with artists who are still going on. And because you turned it down, you really felt that was a bit of a black eye to you guys for moving forward in America. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the every industry has its kind of cookie cutter mentality, don't they? The way to the top, there's always an easy journey. And so it's not wrong that they try and push you in that kind of pipeline and funnel you in, but it just didn't work for us. I mean, we all had family, we all had kids. We weren't doing it for kind of the purpose to be famous or be well known. We were doing it because we genuinely wanted to encounter God in a personal way and through music and express ourselves through. And obviously all the tours were 3 months long, and that didn't fit with our personality of how we wanted to do it. And we always said we want to get to the end of Delirious and all be married and to the same person and not have our lives in tatters. And if it means that we don't go on the road for 3 months at a time, then we'll carve our own kind of route.
Yeah.
And that's really what we ended up doing. So we hit on this kind of, eventually we'll do 10 days. Sometimes we did 2 weeks, but that was rarely. We did a 10 or 12 day tour, which meant we could get 2 weekends in. We'd fly on a sort of Thursday, play on a Friday, Saturday, and we'd basically play all the way through till sort of Sunday sometimes, and then come home on a Monday.
Sure.
But then we'd probably be at home for a week and we get back on a plane and come back to America and do it again.
Yeah.
So totally, it was not the most efficient.
Well, and you said earlier off recording that you haven't been back to America in 17 years, but during Delirious, you were here every month pretty much.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
And you're flying from England, and, definitely one of those things where Delirious wasn't just big in America. In fact, you were big globally, Australia, all over.
Yeah.
What are some of the memories for you? Obviously many may not know this, but you opened for Bon Jovi, Bryan Adams. You were able to go and tour with some great musicians, and they came and toured with you. For instance, people may not know this, but one of Chris Tomlin's first tours was to open for Delirious. And that was in his early career. So what were some of the memories for you over the years, apart from coming to Peoria, Illinois?
Yeah. Well, that was up there, right up there. There's so many gigs. There's a couple. One we signed a deal with Virgin Records, because the other thing with us is that we still had this kind of, it wasn't a desire to be a mainstream artist. It was a desire to have a voice into culture.
Yeah.
And we realized that if you put all your eggs into the Christian basket, it's fantastic, but there's a whole world outside of that culture. It's a subculture. Yeah. And so we signed with Virgin Records really so that we could get some mainstream airplay, and all of our songs were worship songs. We just worked at the poetry.
Right.
So we didn't use church language. And funny enough, that thread has worked its way through me now into the creative.
Right.
When I tried to communicate using the creative without using any Christian jargon, because it limits your audience, and we wanted to have the maximum exposure because we felt that's the message is for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes. That's so good. Well, Stu, I planted a church 23 years ago, and our tagline is same message, different language. We want to communicate the gospel, but in a language that people understand, that's relevant. And that's what you guys have done your whole career and did your whole, during the entire tenure of Delirious. And I was telling Andy before we got you online here that I can go back to 1998 when we started our church, and we were doing modern worship from the very beginning. That was part of our vision to, create a space for people to worship who don't feel comfortable in a traditional church setting. And this is obviously before. Now almost every church uses the contemporary format, but back in the day, nobody was. And we did Delirious songs from the very beginning. I mean, I know like Deeper and Obsession, Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble, Majesty, but we still do Obsession from time to time. Yeah. So the impact you guys had it expands probably further than you guys ever imagined when you began.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I mean, I still hear sometimes I hear those songs, you know, and I like Obsession. I sit there and I think this is an unbelievable song.
Yeah,
the lyrical content and the depth of the lyric writing by Martin was absolutely outstanding, and that's I don't even want to think how many years ago that was, but that combined with this sonic pulse, that has a language all of its own.
Yeah,
there's a real beauty in it, isn't there? But like getting back to your kind of original question, so we signed with Virgin and we did a showcase at the Roxy. I think it was on Sunset Boulevard, and I just remember it being absolutely rammed, and the stage was a corner. It was a corner stage, and literally sort of Stu and John were practically sitting on top of the drum kit. The stage was about 4 foot square. And you could feel the sweat coming off of everybody, and that was outstanding. We went backstage afterwards, and the Virgin guys were like, that is unbelievable." They were like, "There's something in the room that we've never experienced."
Wow!
It wasn't the just musical thing; it was the And they were like, "We've got to do something with you. We don't know what it is. We don't know what to do with you, but there's some energy in this room that we've never felt before." And so that kind of small environment, I often enjoyed more than the big kind of when the nearest person is 50 yards away from you.
Sure. Yeah.
You can't really see them.
Yeah.
I mean, the big shows are always good to do. Yeah, I mean, Tomlin, Switchfoot were another band. Their first tour outside of America was with us. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Got on really well with them. They, we then toured America with them. They taught us how to surf. Nearly killed me.
Let's just pause there, Stu, because to surf you've got to be pretty fit, right? And I always remember you rolling into Peoria the very first time I ever met you guys, and I remember we were getting breakfast and I was like, "Where's Stu?" And you had been on like this 20-mile bike ride before everyone had got up.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big deal to you, right? Can you go into that world a little bit for us? Because it's not just you like to ride bikes. I mean, you're a serious athlete.
Yeah, well, I was. I'm not so much now. Time's a cruel mistress, isn't it? Age is a cruel mistress. Yeah, I mean, I've been into bikes and just I'm running and stuff, but really initially I was into bikes. I used to race mountain bikes and stuff and road bikes, and then of course we're on the road all the time, and that doesn't really work with bikes. So I started running just to stay fit, so that I could then ride my bike as fast and as stupid as I wanted to. And but we were fortunate, obviously we had tour buses and stuff, so I made a few phone calls, made some friends with some people who said, "Yeah, we'll lend you a bike, we'll give you some sort of sponsorship endorsement thing." So they'd ship a bike to the first venue. And then when we were on the tour, the bike would live, under the bus. Everyone else would sleep. I'd get up at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever. And I'd go off and do, 50 miles, 60 miles, sometimes more, explore, and then I'd come back for breakfast. And then I'd maybe go for a run, or I'd get a YMC membership and I'd go off and do a swim and stuff. So triathlon was really my thing. And actually when we were in the band, I was training for Ironman, so the longer distance kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And actually it was fantastic. In fact, one night we all strapped on heart rate monitors on stage, Stu, John and myself, and just out of interest to see what we could get our heart rate. And mine was wet. It was in the 200s for like an hour and 45 minutes. Yeah, it was a good workout as well, and that kind of, for me, it was that demonstrous kind of style of playing where I was never a technical drummer. It was all about passion.
Yeah,
it was all about hitting things as hard as you could,
yeah.
but communicating something, which is when you go and see a band, there's something visceral about music.
Yeah,
there's a physical element. That really annoys me about worship music nowadays. Yeah. When you go into a church and they have tracks in their ears and they're basically a karaoke band.
Yeah.
They just miss the point totally, because it's about reading the room and kind of demonstrating what God's doing physically.
Yeah,
as a band.
And you need to come over and speak at every worship conference going on right now here in the U.S.
Yeah, because it turns everything to vanilla, doesn't it? And that is, worship music should be more multicolored, and stained glass window light than any other style of music.
Ever. So let me ask you a question here then, because this is pretty good. Because so when you guys were playing, were you using any type of track, or everything was live? Were you using a click, or were you just this?
When we started,
metronome?
When we started, there was no such thing.
Right.
And then because of like this, studio background with Martin and Stu and Tim, we were obviously in the studio, and you put in tambo and cowbell or whatever it was, or shaker or something. So we then started to take those little backing tracks and things and use them just as kind of, because we were quite free flow. And I don't know if you remember, like Live and in the Can, there's kind of lots of, the minutes of just kind of sound, not songs. Right. And so we'd have these kind of shaker and tambourines and stuff, tracks, often not with click in the early days.
Right.
As we went on, we did play with tracks, and we had clicks and stuff. And we were probably one of the first bands to adopt in-ear monitoring as well.
Right.
Which I'm really thankful for now, because I wouldn't be able to hear you probably otherwise. But we also had some absolute howlers. We played a gig at Wembley Arena, which is about 7,500 people, I think, from memory. Quite a big show with some other bands, and we were using a DAT tape. And it was so the DAT tape was playing the tracks back then, and as we were playing, the tape stretched. And so Martin is looking around at me like, White, you're so out of time. Like, I'm literally going to kill you after this show. Like, what was the matter with you? Like, and the tape had just stretched. Oh. And so then we had like a mini disc, and we worked out that, every now and again it would jump. And musicians nowadays, they've got it so easy. They just turn up with a Mac and, one lead, and you're plugged in, and there you go.
Yeah.
So it was real kind of pioneering, really, at the time.
I remember when you came to Peoria, you were one of the first bands that had ever used like video with your songs. So connecting a video that you had created, you had this massive screen behind you. I know the first time you came, huge screen behind you with this massive projection lens, and you guys were in sync with the video. That really wasn't happening at that time. That was a new thing. And you're right. You mentioned about it earlier, pushing the edge creatively, moving.
Yeah, I mean, it was financially, it was ridiculous. We could never really afford it. We never really made much money, but it was about the experience, that visceral thing.
Yeah.
The visual and the sound and the audio, they have to marry up.
Yeah.
And for us, it was about how can we best use the creativity that God's given us to engage with people, and then by doing that, allow them to engage with God and encounter God. That was what it was all about. And the visuals always been a really important part of what we've done.
Yeah.
And most of that was quite simple, but it was quite conceptual. So things like Obsession, there was a heartbeat, doom, 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 doom. And, the heartbeat went up and peaked. And, at the end, when it goes crazy, there's just this sort of absolute mess of green and red lines. And, and it becomes part of the performance.
Yeah.
And rather than just a sound thing and a visual thing, you've got this depth and you've got this onslaught of kind of all your senses. If we could have had, smell as well, we would have had that.
Right. Well, I remember that night, the very first time you guys came, you brought Matt Redman with you. Matt was just, I think, blessed be the name of the Lord. He had written like a month before, and he was trying it out on this tour. And the facility that we were at had a balcony. I don't know if you remember this. I mean, we oversold it, right? The venue. So I think it was around 1,600 people in this venue, but with a balcony. And I remember halfway through, we had to pull Martin to a side and say, can you tell people to stop dancing in the balcony? Because we can physically see it going up and down. And we were worried it was going to give way. Yeah. And, but one story I want to share about this that many people wouldn't know about. After that night, I turned to Stu jokingly and said, hey, if you ever get rid of this drum kit, let me know. And you were sponsored by Premier, which was an English drum manufacturer, amazing drum kits. And we were joking around, right? And so 6 months later, I get this call from Stu, email from Stu saying, hey, if you want my drum kit, it's in Nashville. I'm getting a new one. Get down there. And I'm like, I'll get it. Don't worry. That's amazing. But here's a crazy story. And this will tell you how long ago this was. I said to Stu, is there anything I can give you for this drum kit? And Apple had just bought out the iPod, right? Yeah. And so Stu's like, we can't get iPods in England yet. And with all the running and all the biking, I would love an iPod. And so I remember, I don't know if you remember this. I said, where do you want me to send it? And you sent me Rick Warren's address because you were playing at Saddleback. Yeah. And I shipped it there. And so I have Stu Smith's drum kit in my basement that has been used many times.
Wow.
From me and Ethan, who, you know, Ethan is now at Mosaic Church in LA.
Yeah, it was great to hear that. Amazing.
Yeah. And he's also in the worship team. And so that kit is still in he couldn't take it to LA. It's still in my basement.
I know, but it's outlasted the iPod, that's for sure. Premier trumps Apple.
But definitely for you, you know, you've had this amazing career with Delirious, right? But then there came a time where, and I mean, when we say amazing, like, not just the small gigs. I know when you gave me that drum kit, you said, hey, I can get it to you after July 4th because I'm playing at Creation Fest. So the last gig that you played on that was like in front of 60,000 people or something crazy like that. And so things are going really good. And then there was a sad day that happened in our house when the announcement come through that Stu Smith was leaving Delirious. This is before the band finished. You know, a few years later, you left before that. And I mean, there was, I'm not being, and this not from me, but from my boys, there was a few tears like, no way, Stu cannot leave Delirious. Yeah. What was behind all of that?
Yeah, well, there's more tears in our house. If that helps. And I'll transfer some money for the therapy sessions you've had.
I thought you were going to say somebody stole your drum kit.
Somebody stole my drum kit. That was the end of my career.
Oh, so it was all about me. Oh no.
So it's yeah, I mean, I always absolutely loved, you know, what we did and my kind of role within the band. But you know, we had two daughters. The eldest was just becoming a teenager. And you know, when you're away 6 months of the year, you know, it's just hard work. I guess out of us all as well, because we were a team, you make democratic decisions based on all of you as a team. You know, and there's 5 of us in the band, but there's a manager and there's crew and there's, you know, lots of other people involved. And I was probably always the kind of, oh, can we not make it that long, that tour? Can we just get back a little bit earlier? I never really enjoyed being away. Like, I enjoyed I absolutely loved what I did. But, you know, I got married to be with my wife because we enjoyed being together. And so that was a real hardship, you know, even though everything we were doing was amazing. It was blimmin' hard work. Like,
and you're all family too, correct? I mean, for those who are just tuning in, may not have heard Martin or Stu or Tim's interview. Can you go through that dynamic real quick?
Yeah. So Martin's a front man, and his wife is Sarah. Sarah's my wife. So Martin's wife is Sarah's sister. And then Tim was married to Sarah's other sister, Becca. And then John was the bass player, and he was Sarah's little brother. And then Stu G, fortunately for him, was not physically related to any of us. So he got away with it. Although they obviously became sort of part of the clan. Yeah. But yeah, I just didn't want to be away for 6 months of the year with a teenage family. I knew that we were transitioning from bringing up children, which is very kind of physical, into something which becomes more emotional.
Yeah.
And I knew that I didn't want to be away, and for my kids to come to me and say, have a problem, or phone me up when I'm away, and and you say, oh, we'll talk about it in 2 weeks when I'm back.
Yeah.
It just didn't work. And I knew, for me, the most important thing for me, and still is to have a relationship with my kids. Right. And to be able to help them and bring them up and nurture them and guide them and in life. And, that was more important than what I was doing, even though what I was doing was, I was, called by God. I think your family was still more important to me.
Yeah.
And so it was a really difficult decision. Yeah. And, we spent months kind of talking it through as a family, but also as a band of, how could this work? Are there other ways of still doing what we do? And but it wasn't possible. So in that respect, I was the early adopter. So I was a bit lagging behind when we made the decision to start the band.
But you did make an appearance, though, on the farewell night when Delirious finished just a few years later. You made this guest appearance and played Investigate. Tell us about coming back, even though it wasn't, 10, 15 years, but still coming back. That decision you made still felt right? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was brilliant to come back and get a great reception, and play music with my mates again. Because I still miss it. I still miss that camaraderie. When you're in a band, there's a camaraderie that you don't really realize what's going on at the time. Particularly when it becomes your job and their family. But there's a camaraderie that I've never ever been able to get close to ever since.
Yeah.
And that's probably the hardest thing, and as men, I've actually, a bit over the journey, I've been involved in men's ministry of, gathering men together and doing all kinds of stuff, because I think men, we need each other.
Yeah.
And, there was something in that was quite unique. But, I mean, the show was amazing. I went on and played, and Paul Evans was a sort of old friend of ours who was like, a little kid in the church that I kind of was sort of trained up and as a drummer and has gone on to be an awesome drummer. And so he kind of filled in for when I left. And so it was brilliant to sit alongside him and play and get that connection with the guys again, on stage was amazing.
Yeah.
Well, now, Stu, let's fast forward to the present. You actually put down your sticks a little while ago and returned to the creative world. And right now you head up a charity, CPO, and you're the creative director of a Common Good studio. Why don't you tell us a little bit about all of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was fortunate in that I carried on that creative career through Delirious. So when we stopped, in fact, I worked a couple of days a week for Furious Records, which was our label, and kind of carrying that through, and then built up my own client base. Did that for actually 16 years, had some brilliant clients, worked some amazing clients. And then about a year ago, 18 months ago, got this call from a guy that I knew at this charity called CPO, saying that we've restructured. We're wanting to get the creative sort of really back, sort of fired up again. You want to come in and have a chat, and ended up going and having a chat, not really wanting a job or anything, but getting offered this job and thinking, I don't know what happened there. Like, I was hoodwinked into it, but I think for me, getting back to that side of camaraderie as well, and my personality and characters has been all about people, and so doing my own thing and actually sitting in this office where I'm now, I did that for 16 years. pretty much every day without really seeing many people. And I realized that God had something else for me in terms of investing into other people. I'm obviously, getting on a little bit now and wanting to sort of use some of that experience. And so the idea of building a team, investing into younger creatives, passing on some kind of wisdom and experience, and building up, an agency that could, I suppose, kind of relive the Delirious dream in terms of listening to God, doing something in a space and being brilliant at it.
Yeah.
And that's my kind of dream for the creative. How do you take the message that we all understand and it's all in our heads and in our hearts, and how do we use visuals and creativity to communicate that to the world?
Yeah.
And that's my challenge now. And in the sort of process of that, encourage young creatives, inspire them to look at the gospel differently and learn how to, and there's so many different connection points now within creativity, with the sort of rise of social media and different platforms. And, we're having conversations now about, cryptocurrency and, will that become, the giving platform for churches,
right.
NFTs, all those kind of stuff, which is, we're not there yet, but the face of church and the digital era that we live in, we have to embrace that as a church.
Yeah.
And we have to get good at it, because that's the world that our culture lives in.
Yeah.
So we had this charity called CPO. It was started 63 years ago. Three guys lived in Bristol, which is on the sort of southwest of the UK. They actually ran a creative agency, and at the time they were top of their game in tobacco industry in terms of design. Totally non-Christians, ended up going to a Billy Graham crusade, got radically saved, sold their business, gave their business away, sold all their houses, moved to a massive house not far from where I live now, and lived in a community as Christians.
Wow.
And looked at the church and said, hey, the church doesn't know how to communicate the gospel. They just don't know how to do it in terms of creative. So they started this organization called CPO, Christian Publishing Outreach, and started producing gospel tracts and posters and literature and all kinds of stuff to really help the church. And obviously it's been through a massive changeover, printing and all the rest of it has changed and digital has changed. But, so my kind of remit is to get in there and really sort of get the agency back to being really culturally relevant. So we merged with a digital agency in September just gone. So I've now got a team of, 10 people, ranging from one designer who's 70, who is absolutely awesome. He doesn't want to stop working because he just loves it so much.
Yeah.
And he's brilliant at his job. Absolutely awesome guy. And he's been at CPO. In fact, I'll tell you this story, and I hope nobody from CPO ever listens to this because they don't know yet. But last week he was at CPO for 40 years. Wow. So I went into the office, and Phil's been there 40 years. So I went down to the local baker's and I bought this massive carrot cake, right? And so they boxed it up and they said, and I walked there from the office. They said, we'll just tie it up so you can carry it. Halfway back, the string snapped. And it fell face down in the road. So this beautiful cream topping was tarmac side down in front of a lorry. So I kind of scooped it up and put it back in the box. Got back to the office, went into the kitchen. No one's watching. Got a knife. Kind of really took out a few bits of grit and a few twigs. Served it up to everyone, and I didn't have the heart to tell them. So. They still don't know. I had a bit, and there was a few crunch bits. I hope they don't ever listen to this.
Oh man, that is brilliant.
And then there's all the way down from guys that have just left college, uni. They're absolutely brilliant designers. We've got a great team, and so we really want to kind of build on that and work out how can we really communicate the essence of the gospel to the world.
Well, and we talked on Revival Town this last Christmas and the Christmas before about Share the Light campaign that you guys did that got national notification as far as being on TV. Amazing. If you're listening now and just jump on YouTube and type in Share the Light campaign, you'll be able to find this amazing. It's designed to be like a commercial during really hard times, right? During COVID, this was launched. And can you tell us a bit about that whole campaign?
Yeah, so when I went in August to chat to these guys about this opportunity, they at the end of it they said, "Oh, have you got 10 minutes just to sort of brainstorm some ideas for Christmas, because we haven't got anyone that can help us and we're like 3 months behind." So I said, "Well, have you've surely used video?" "No, I never used video." So I was like, "Well, if you want to hit the market, let's produce a video." So they found a budget, and I pulled in my old creative friend Andy Hutch, who worked on a lot of the Delirious visuals. He ended up then being our lighting guy, and we've worked on numerous projects and campaigns for many. In fact, he was our lodger, and in fact, this was his bedroom that I'm speaking from. So, like full circle. And so we dreamt up this kind of, there's a big brand in the UK called John Lewis, which is a kind of online retailer, and the John Lewis Christmas ad is kind of anticipated now in kind of the last week in November. And we wanted to do something which was that kind of more emotive, that positioned the church and what Christmas was about, and actually kind of pulled on people's heartstrings. And obviously the first one we did another one this year, funny enough. But the first one was we were in kind of lockdown, and churches weren't open, and there was this kind of, no one really knew. And, people were saying, "Oh, Christmas has been forgotten."
Mm.
And we were like, "No, you can't forget Christmas. It's not just a day. There's something about it. It's historic,
Yeah.
So we wanted to produce something that kind of gave this message of hope to people. And this year we've kept with the Share the Light campaign. So if you go on YouTube, there's actually 2 now. There's new one, and this year's one has been massively. People are talking about it all over the place, because I think it's probably one of the best pieces of work I've ever done in terms of visual communication and capturing an essence and a concept and physically getting that onto film.
Yeah.
And
it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. People, please check
so
it
good.
out.
And speaking of visual communication, did you work creatively kind of behind the scenes with the Dancing in the Fire CD, the new release from Martin Smith a couple weeks ago?
Yeah. So as an agency, I mean, Martin and I have actually become quite close over the last sort of couple of years. We had a period when I left the band when it was, we just didn't, our paths, apart from sort of family birthdays and stuff. But then we both had a season ticket for Brighton and Hove Albion on the,
So you're the guys. Sorry.
Yeah, we are the fans. We're chanting there somewhere. And so we just started hanging out, and then we just started dreaming a bit of kind of, and I think for Martin, he's, since Delirious left, I mean, I wouldn't say too much, but I think he's missed that kind of having a group of people around him that can really support him. And that was something that was quite unique in the structure that we had. And so I said to Martin, I'd love to just help you. What can we do to help you creatively? And so we've tried to build this team around him that can just support him and take his ideas and really flesh them out. And also, a team out, or myself, that have kind of say, "That's not a great idea, Martin." Because I think once you get to that level, there's not many people that will say that to you.
Right.
And I think that was probably the thing that he was suffering from most. And so we've done, initially we did all the social media campaigns, and then Hutch was involved in the video, so I got kind of pulled in, "Can you just come in and help?" And I ended up doing the styling for Martin and kind of helping direct it with Andy. And then the last one on the beach, we did the whole thing as a team. We did all the production. I did the concept, Andy shot it. It was a one take, which it was fascinating to do it as a one take. Ellie obviously choreographing Ellie to come in at the same time. And we shot it on a local beach just down the road from me. But that again, the beauty of that is it's captured a purity of the worship spirit.
Yeah.
It's not about the big production things. It's just about the purity of the song and the heart that was in the whole thing. And then we did a photo shoot with Martin with the flags. You know, even that was a crazy kind of. We came up with some concepts, and one of our designers said, I've got a feeling there's something in flags, and I was like, yeah, maybe in sort of the 90s. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't say it to them. And anyway, we got into this sort of presentation with Martin, just kind of discussing ideas, and we put this, you know, one sort of flag concept in there. And so we get to the sort of third down the list, you know, we've got this idea of the flag, and Martin stopped, and I'm like, Martin's feeling something here, you know.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's really weird you've got a flag. I literally this morning I've just commissioned this lady to make me some flags, because I was talking about flags and colours of flags, and so the album cover, you know, so that kind of connection worked out. So we did all the visuals and all the artwork for that, and all the promo for the singles as well. So it's
I know Tim's got a bunch of flags from Big Church Day Out. Can you just grab one of them?
They're so high up.
Oh, Martin, this has been, Martin.
Next co-host.
Same surname.
It's been so good. I was just looking at the cover of Dancing in the Fire. So, but you know, we really appreciate you taking your time to share your story, take us on this journey behind the scenes with Delirious and what you're doing in the creative world. And I know there are people listening right now, maybe even young musicians who have aspirations of being a part of a worship community and touring, traveling, playing, creatives who are listening, saying, I need to branch out and begin to fulfill what God's calling me to do. Can you take a moment and pray for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely love to. Yeah. Father, we thank you for everything that you've put across our paths and the experience. We thank you that you are full of goodness and grace. So when we mess up, you smile at us and you take us in your hand and you lead us to another place. Yeah. Father, I pray for all those that are listening today that have got dreams and vision and passion. I pray that you'd fill their lungs with confidence with your Holy Spirit. And Father, that you direct them on a path that gives them the confidence and the ability and the opportunity to be able to communicate, whether that's through audio and music and worship, whether that's a visual, graphic, film, social media, digital, don't really care what the platform is. But you've given us these tools and ways of communicating and impacting culture that we've never had in the history of our world. And Father, we pray more than anything that your love for our world somehow would manifest itself in real people, in real lives, in the very now, in the very human nature of who we are. We pray that you bless us on that journey. When it's a struggle, that you'd give us the confidence to bounce back. You'd put people around us that would be championing us and would be cheering us on. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stu. Well, before we get to the big three, which is the three questions that everyone really wants to hear, what are ways that people can connect with you, whether it be social media, things like that? How can they follow your story and journey?
Yeah, well, if they want to see like what I call my beach, because it's at the end of my road and it's my beach. That's on Instagram. it's Smeezer, SMEEZER. That's my kind of nickname that I've sort of taken for the band. So yeah, Instagram Smeezer should be easy to find. There's not too many of us. And then commongoodstudio.co.uk.
Okay.
Is the other way to connect with us.
And you're on Instagram with that as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, love to hear anyone. You know, we want to try and build a community and support people, you know, globally. We're doing some stuff in America with some musicians and artists as well. So maybe I'll make it back over to your side of the pond shortly.
Oh, well, you mentioning that, I'm going to go straight into the big three, okay? Which is three questions. And my first question is this. If you've mentioned 17 years, you haven't been back to the States. If you were coming back next week, apart from Peoria, Illinois, where would you go first in America?
I think probably Newport Beach, California.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you'll have to see Ethan. He's in LA, so it's pretty close. Yeah. He'd put you up in his 1-bedroom apartment. So
yeah, nice. Yeah. I hope he's got a poster on the wall. That might be a bit awkward.
All right, Chuck. All right. My question has two parts, Stu. First one is, what's your favorite Delirious song to play live? What's your favorite Delirious song to listen to?
I'm trying to remember them. Glorious was always a good one to play because it was a bit of a banger.
Yeah. You knew when that was starting because Stu would kick it off.
Yeah. And probably Obsession.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit of a timeless classic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It just brings back so many memories.
Yeah.
Love it.
Good. Okay. For all those Americans that love the Brits, they really do love the Brits, right? If they are coming to see you, what type of food are you taking them in your town to eat?
I know the answer is fish and chips. I know all Americans want fish and chips.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So I spent 24 hours in London. That's my time in Europe, right? Yeah. And I did everything you can do in those 24 hours. I rode the double-decker bus. I went to all the sites. I stopped at a pub for fish and chips. I did it all. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think if it's an American, it would definitely be fish and chips.
Yeah.
All right.
By the beach.
Oh, yeah. On the beach with seagulls trying to swoop down and steal your fish.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. So you end up waving your arms around the air most of the time. Yeah. It's not enjoyable.
Yeah.
But it's delicious.
Yeah.
But it tastes good. Yeah. It tastes really good.
Well, Stu, we want to thank you for being on Revival Town podcast today. And we haven't even mentioned it. Revival Town comes from a Delirious song.
Yeah.
Inspiration for us doing this. So thank you for your input in that as well. Amazing song. But thank you more for being on today. People hopefully have been able to go behind the curtain of Delirious a little bit more and also into your world creatively. I know you're an inspiration to so many people globally. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, giving us your time. Thank you.
Nice to eventually make it on.
Yeah. That's good.
It won't be forgotten, my friend.
I guess I got to find somewhere else to stay next time I go over.
Yeah, well, if I ever get a new drum kit, we'll see.
Well, thanks for being on, Stu.
Yeah, if you ever get rid of that desk that's behind you.
We appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so great connected. Take care, guys. See ya.
Bye.
All right, everyone. It's time for another conversation on Revival Town Podcast. Stu Gerard, a.k.a. Stu G, has spent a lifetime in music and collaboration. As a founder, member, guitarist, and songwriter for the British band Delirious, Stu and his bandmates left a legacy urging others to pioneer in the area of music and worship. After Delirious ended in 2009, Stu's journey continued across the pond and worldwide. He continues to be a sought-after guitarist and songwriter in the Nashville scene and tours with Michael W. Smith. Stu's passion for collaborating and helping people has led to his life work, the Beatitudes Project, an online e-course. He's also the author of the book Words from the Hill, An Invitation to the Unexpected, using film, music, and stories encouraging people to discover the counterintuitive way of following Jesus. Stu, welcome to Revival Town Podcast. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, Chuck. And hey, Andy, thank you for having me.
Oh, and we also need to let people know we've obviously had Martin on in recent months from Delirious, and Stu and Martin wrote the song Revival Town, which is
the inspiration for the title of this podcast.
That's amazing. And yeah,
we were just thinking, I wonder if we're paying royalties. We may need to do something.
Did you get our check?
Thank you.
Well, I noticed that Tim's been on already as well. Yeah. So you're gradually working your way down the list.
And you know who I'm going to get a message from tonight is Stu Smith, because when we first had Tim on, who was the first person we had on, he was like, hey, wait, why did you start with Tim?
Well, I used to do a podcast called 41 Strong, and Andy, your friend Dave Jane was on episode like 147, and I introduced him as my good friend Dave. He's like, my good friend, he waited 147 episodes to have me.
Well, Stu, we thank you for taking the time, and obviously we've got so much to talk about. A lot of the things that have been going on recently with COVID and what you are doing now. But I thought what we would do is go back to the early years of Delirious, because you were the only one that was not part of the family, so to speak, of all the guys. How did you get connected with the guys when in the early years before it was even called Delirious?
Yeah, well, look, going back, I was part of a church in London called Praise Community Church, and my wife and I, we lived with our pastor and his wife. We lived in community there, and we basically traveled around with them, and that's where I learned, like, we were new Christians, and that's where I learned how to lead worship and play music in church and kind of get involved in that sort of thing. And part of that journey, we helped plant a church in Belgium and a little house church there. And but at the same time, I had my own band, and we would play the rock venues in London and roundabouts, and we'd have a ready-made audience come from the people in the church and what have you, and so we'd often get repeated invitations to go back. And anyway, that led on to me becoming a worship pastor at a church in Kettering in the East Midlands, and I was kind of responsible for 3 congregations there, and during that time I was able to travel and tour with some other worship leaders. So one in particular was Noel Richards from the UK, and another one was Kevin Prosh, who was from America. And working with those 2 people in particular was when I got connected with Martin and Tim to start with, because Noel Richards used to have this forum for worship leaders and musicians that he would have in Cobham every month or so, and so we met there, and that was right at their beginning of starting the Cutting Edge events, and so they invited me down to play one week, and so I remember that initial drama hall in a school with about 70 kids, and that's when I started, and so I went back home after that night, and I said to my wife Karen, I said, next time we go down, because they'd love me to go back, like, you should come with me, and because don't know what, but there's something going on here, and so we went down together, and over the next few months of this period of time, we kind of fell in love with the people and the church down there, and we ended up they invited us to go down and be a part of it all. I mean, it wasn't a job or anything. It wasn't like we weren't touring or anything like that, but we just wanted to be around that environment and part of the church in Littlehampton, and so we moved from Kettering down to Littlehampton, and so I had to leave a job. I had to leave my employment.
Wow.
And I went back to being an electrician, which was my initial trade.
Wow.
And Karen was 6 months pregnant. We had a little girl who was just over a year old, and it was just like we would have done anything to be a part of it.
Wow.
So if it meant moving and leaving an income, all that kind of stuff, that paled into insignificance compared to being around something with friends, that there was this some kind of vision for worship and music and keeping it kind of real,
Yeah, and so it truly was a step of faith. Then you weren't moving for the band as the band was set up and you were ready to go on the road. This was purely moving because you felt God was in the midst, in the area.
Yes. Wow. Yes, and also we I was writing songs and leading and touring with a band and all that kind of stuff, and and so there was a shift there as well, because I obviously wasn't the front man, and I went to support what was happening with Martin and and his kind of gifting and what have you, and it didn't feel like I was taking a step backwards or anything like that. It was just like, let's go and see what God does here.
Wow,
that's so cool.
Probably one of the best moves you've ever made. just to be around that, but then to see what happened from there. Tell us a bit, and we've asked Tim and Martin the same question, but tell us about those early years of the cutting edge, the live and in a can time. There was something that was birthed out of Littlehampton at that time that is still affecting the world. Some of those songs, I just recently saw Kerry Jobe and Cody Carnes do a version of Obsession, and that's now on their tour. I saw they're doing it on their tour, but that was birthed out of this awakening. Tell us a bit about that time.
Yeah, so it was an extraordinary time in the UK. I'm going to mention Kevin Prosh again, because he really, if no one knows who Kevin Prosh is, at the time that I knew him, he was part of the Vineyard movement. He had an incredible prophetic gift and was an incredible musician. And so, but what he was doing when I got to tour with him and hang out with him, what have you, and he was another person that I just wanted to be around. And so he was encouraging people to kind of really push their how can I say this? Like he'd always say, "God loves your tone." It was a bit of a joke, but like as a guitar player, he was encouraging me to use all my influences and like pray through my guitar, and prophesy through music, and so that's what kind of like was happening at the same time in the UK. There was like this thing that was kind of a unity that was starting to happen. So what happened with the cutting edge events was that these were local to Littlehampton, and but as that sort of sound got out, through these little cassette tapes that we were making, people started to come, and we'd get the odd invite here and there, come to Milton Keynes, and we're going to do like a citywide event, and so we said yes to a lot of those, and so what was happening was that all these churches were getting together. It didn't matter what denominations they were, Catholic, Protestant, whatever, everything within those things. We were all getting together and like having these nights of worship and teaching, I guess. That because there was something about, and I remember Martin saying something similar to you about this, but how like there was something that we were doing that was like singing over people, like singing over the city, and we were kind of like riding this wave of sort of unity amongst churches in the UK. And it wasn't just us, like talking about Kevin Prosh, like we when I was playing with him, we played at the very first Soul Survivor conference and or event, and that kind of blew up. There was a 17-year-old Matt Redman there, and Kevin was influential in, kind of seeing where he could go, and so so if you think about that time, what was happening with Soul Survivor, what was happening with us on the South Coast, it wasn't just us that turned into Delirious. It was people like Soul Survivor and Matt Redman and Tim Hughes, and all getting inspired at the same time, and that's what kind of came out of the UK and sort of inspired the world.
Wow. So those early years obviously became foundational, but then there was that, and I don't know if it was a switch for you guys, as in we're going to do something different, or if it was just following that prompting of God of, okay, we've got to get our music out to a bigger crowd so they can hear about Jesus. And there was that turn, especially in the UK with the BBC and with people starting to really want to hear it.
Yeah. So, my memory of that is that Martin wrote the song, Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble? And I remember the night that we did that for the first time at a Cutting Edge event. And, we probably played music for about 45 minutes or something, but we only played that song. Like, kind of going in and out of it. And, this idea of open up the doors and let the music play. And I remember Becca Jupp getting up and kind of, like exhorting everyone to not keep what we have to a Sunday night once a month or just to the four walls of the church, but, to take what we have right now and let it come with us into our colleges, our workplaces, our, and we were encouraging people to do that. And I remember having the conversation with Martin, like even just around his bedside after he had his accident, and he was saying, I really feel like I've been given a second chance. And like he'd been reading this book called U2 at the End of the World by a journalist called Bill Flanagan. And he said, you got to read it, Stu. It's like really life-changing. And it really was. Like he says, I want to do this. Yeah. And so we kind of decided that our music wasn't just for the events that we were doing, worship events, like that we really wanted to have it out on the street. We wanted to open up the doors and let the music play, and so, and there wasn't a huge Christian industry. There were Christian artists and worship records and things like that, so it wasn't non-existent, but it wasn't like a really big kind of industry. And so the natural step for us was, well, it just needs to be out in the high street alongside everyone else, all our influences, and so at the time it was people like U2, like Radiohead, and etc. And so we wanted to release singles. And I remember we had a song called White Ribbon Day. And I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but to a point. We had a song called White Ribbon Day, and it was about the peace process in Northern Ireland. And we did this gig in the Midlands somewhere, and this gentleman came up to us and said, I really love that song. It's before it was recorded, and he said, I really want, I could really see this being a single, like this message needs to get out. And he gave us some money to help us release this as a single. And that was our very first single release. It was before King of Fools, it was before all Deeper and everything like that. And so, we did that, and we didn't quite make the top 40 on that one. It went to number 41.
Oh, man, so close.
But,
41
it was,
game though.
I know, it was a start, and it kind of got our juices going to sort of see what was possible.
Yeah.
So just taking a step back, like after Martin's accident, and I know he's told the story on here, but and we all ended up deciding, this is what we want to do. We're going to go for this. We're going to go full time. I remember Tim saying, if we were able to, say yes to all these invites and do sort of 2, 3, 4 times a week that we'd be going out and playing at these places, I reckon we could. And if we sell this many cassettes and if we sell this many T-shirts, I reckon we could pay ourselves £800 a month. And so we were, like, yeah, let's do it. And so so we decided to after Martin's accident, and everyone was in this kind of same place, because we'd all got really busy with the cutting edge stuff, as well as holding our jobs down, and so we decided to go full time, and we decided to call ourselves Delirious. And for that first year, we pretty much said yes to a lot of these kind of citywide events. We went out, we're doing music and worship. But so Tim owned a studio, and Martin was a sound engineer, and we had a truck that carried our gear around, and we bought a console that we could keep in the truck, and Martin had a 24-track tape machine, and that used to stay in the truck. And we had someone that would press record at the beginning of every night. And so for about a year, we just recorded everything we did, including all the songs we did, and all the prophetic moments, all that kind of singing out stuff, and waiting on God moments. And that's what became Live and in the Can.
Wow. And it's probably one of the best albums, projects that's ever been released, mainly because you did something that people weren't really doing, which was letting those moments go. Those things. It wasn't just every first song 3.5 minutes, now on to the next one. You guys were some of the first guys that were a band, at least, that were letting that go. And
the thing is that we were hungry to experience the presence of God, and I think we all kind of realized that. I want to say this is kind of like usual language, but we're nothing without the presence of God, or that He is our promoter. He's the one that lifts us up. Like He's the it was all about the presence. And so to create an environment or an experience for people, it doesn't happen just like that. And so we decided to sometimes hang out with the music, and sometimes in silence, but just kind of, one of our phrases was, I'm going to embarrass myself now, like following wherever it goes, right. that sort of phrase, and then that's what we did.
Yeah.
Like, and then we had no one, like we didn't have we owned our own label, that kind of developed. So we didn't have anyone telling us we could or couldn't do anything.
Right.
So we just went for it, and they were amazing days.
Yeah. And well, brings back so many memories for me. Like Andy mentioned, I planted a church back in 1998, and I remember that the very first thing that we did before we planted the church was we put together our band, and we knew it was going to be a strong emphasis on worship and the presence of God and music. And our vision from the very beginning was to create an environment that attracted people who weren't comfortable in a traditional church setting. We weren't against it. We were just choosing to reach a different group of people that didn't know Christ. And this was before, nowadays everybody has a contemporary service and everybody's into the modern worship scene, which you guys helped pave the way for that. Because when I remember early on going into the practices before, this is when we were just still planning the church. I remember the band being excited about Delirious songs. I remember in our early years when there was so much excitement because the guys were like, this is what we want to do. This is it. This is what church should be. We want to usher people into the presence of God. Obviously His Spirit is within us, but there's something about worship. The word says ushers in the presence of God. In the presence of God, there's a fullness of joy. The joy of the Lord is our strength. It's all connected to worship. So I love that, Stu. I'm so grateful for the path that you guys blazed. It's still having a lasting effect in our church 23 years later. We still do obsession.
Yeah. Right.
And here's
we're obsessed with obsession.
Here's the crazy thing. I was just literally 2 weeks ago, I was downstairs and my son Ethan is 23 now. He was upstairs and was listening to Glow, the album Glow. And he came downstairs and he goes, Dad, they don't do this anymore. Like, there is no one that is pushing the musical boundaries like Delirious did in those early years. And I was like, yeah, that's why I like to listen to them. But what was amazing for me was all these years later, it was still relating musically as well as spiritually to a younger generation as well, which was, obviously he's grown up around Delirious. He's had to in our house, but for him to come down and just say, there's nothing like this out there, you know? And, so it was really cool to see that. Obviously moving on from that, Stu, you had an amazing run with Delirious, played some incredible events, worship nights. What were some of the highlights along that end part of the journey for you?
Yeah, gosh, so many. I mean, I personally never felt more alive than when we're in environments. You know, I'm doing quotes here, but in the high street. So, you know, things like Glastonbury Festival. We got to tour with Bon Jovi and play some dates with some folks like that. And you know, like playing those festivals in Europe that were kind of rock festivals and radio, you know, when we had hits on the radio and stuff like that. That was really special. They were heady times and really special. It felt like we were definitely kind of pioneering something, because we would do songs like History Maker and My Glorious, and you know, we didn't change anything for the environment, you know. That was amazing. Those were incredible times. And then I think going to India was one of the things that kind of changed my life. And being able to play there, and it wasn't just about the crowds and the playing to the music. You know, although we did play to something like 1.2 million people over 3 nights or something.
Wow.
400,000 a night, something like that. And it was just these.
The food
experience, you know. What was that?
I said
food?
It was the food.
Yeah.
I love Indian food.
Love
Sorry,
food.
didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Oh my God. Yeah,
I could go for some naan right now.
that's right. Yeah, it was just this idea that being exposed to some of the extremes in India, and kind of, you know, being faced with extreme poverty. That was really life-changing for me, and so it was things like that. You know, we got to play in like almost 50 different countries in our career, and so that was amazing. That was eye-opening.
Yeah, because you would be in one place they're looking after you really good, you know, in a nice hotel, but then you're going through something that is wrecking your life to get to a venue. I remember you guys writing about that on some of the later projects that you were doing.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something, Stu. I mean, you've obviously played around the globe, and now you tour with Michael W. Smith. Do you have any musical influences that would come as a surprise to most people listening?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, yes. I mean, I really love dance music, honestly. And they used to call me Stu Garage, and, you know, because I was really into garage music in the UK around 2000. So I love dance music. You know, I grew up with 2 young girls as my daughters, and so, you know, everything from the Spice Girls to to Kanye West. You know,
was that influencing your dress as well? Is that the Spice Girls?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I suppose I was the original Ginger Spice. I don't know. That was before I went bald.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Oh man, that's funny. Did you doing about that? I know when you came to Peoria, you came here 3 times with Delirious, but then you came here with Amy and Michael W. Smith.
Right.
And I think that was the early years of you being with Michael.
Yes, that had been 2011.
Yeah, and that was the that was, I don't know if you remember this or not. We came to pick you up, Ethan and myself, at the hotel. And as we walked in, you weren't down yet, but Amy was there with her crew, the band and the crew members. And then you came down and said, "Hey, have you met Amy? Because she's right here." And I said, "Well, years ago, but I haven't seen her in years, you know." And you introduced us, and not knowing, you know, years later now, that introduction, Stu, as it impacted the Dream Center in a huge way, not just financially, but people getting connected to the Dream Center. Amy came back, got involved with the Dream Center. And then obviously from that, when I was in Nashville, did some work with Amy as well. But it was all from you saying, have you chatted with Amy recently? And she asked the dangerous question asking me, "So what do you do?"
Yes.
Because you know Amy, you know her heart and her passion. Yes. She's been on the show here, and people heard that passion and compassion for people. She was a part of a project that you've been involved in as well.
Yes.
And was it that compassion that drew you two together to get her involved with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so you're talking about something called the Beatitudes Project. And I was on tour with Michael and Amy, and I was telling her, she's such an amazing person. And we were sitting down having coffee one day, and she said, "So what else are you doing, Stu?" And I said, "Well, got this I've been working on this dream that I've had for years, to kind of put a modern lens on the Beatitudes, like what they look like now and how they can help us live a different way." And anyway, I was telling her the story, and she was like, "Well, that sounds amazing. If there's any way I can help, let me know." And I said, "Well, would you like to write a song with me?" And she said yes straight away. And so that totally surprised me. And
Twist my arm.
And then several months later, our paths crossed, and she said, "Oh, you haven't hit me up yet, And I said, "Oh, I wanted to wait until I've got like a good idea, because I don't want to waste your time, And she said, like, "Stu, I'm always available. Like if I'm busy, I won't be able to do something. If I'm not, I will." So that was that. Anyway, so her enthusiasm for that project, and also, how I was explaining the Beatitudes to her, and she was kind of saying, "Well, I've never heard anything like this. I always thought it was about, a list of things to attain to, and of course I'm coming from the point of view that it's all about the presence of God, and so full of grace and mercy, So anyway, so she was. She said yes, and I had this idea that it should be the mercy song for Blessed Are the Merciful, and we ended up having lunch with a woman who'd been on death row for 27 years.
Wow.
And had her sentence commuted and was eventually out on parole. And so we sat down at Amy's house with her and had this conversation about what mercy looks like to her as a woman on death row, but also the women at Thistle Farms in Nashville, who are all survivors of prostitution, addiction, trafficking.
Wow.
So that was amazing.
Well, let's dive into the book. I was talking to Chuck earlier about the book. Let's dive into that a little bit, because that then led into the e-course, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So, the Beatitudes Project really came about because, I was kind of like looking at what was happening in the world and all this division. This is, before the last 4 years, it was like before all this kind of political upheaval was happening, but it was still very polarized, all this division, not much empathy and compassion in the world. And I've always been focused on the Sermon on the Mount. Like, so when we would travel in America, as with Delirious, people would say, "Can you sign my CD and can you put your favorite scripture on it?" And funnily enough, that's like That's an American thing. You don't get asked that anywhere else in the world. I would always sign Matthew 5:6-7, which is the Sermon on the Mount. And so over the years, the Beatitudes came into focus for me after reading it. And it came into focus because I thought it would be a Delirious album. There's 8 themes, and I thought, it's great to sing about poverty in the world, and how we lament properly, and being peacemakers, and all this stuff, and showing mercy. It's like they're great themes for songs, and I thought it would be a Delirious record. And then when Delirious finished, we hadn't got around to doing that. Like, for me, when Delirious finished, it was a really difficult time. Like, I was in my 40s, and I was looking back and thinking, oh no, is my best work behind me, and what's next, and anyway, I had my own sort of moment of a couple of years, really, of like experiencing what I describe as, in the Beatitudes Project, as a bottom of life moment, right? Yeah. And you're in the space between something finishing and something happening, and the Beatitudes I began to understand the Beatitudes in a different way. Like, rather than a list of things to achieve a blessing, they became about announcements of what is, and about this announcement of presence. Like, God is on your side when you're at the end of your rope. God is on your side when you are mourning and grieving. And it became very much about the blessing being presence. And then obviously, it's not just one way, like, we're invited. Then the invitation is also presence, like to be present to ourselves, to our own places that we need to grieve, or and it invites us to live a different way of becoming peacemakers and showing mercy and being willing to suffer for what we're the way we're living. So anyway, the project became music. So it's an album. It became a book of like my journey of like telling stories about different people, and it was it's a film, music, book, like a whole documentary film. It's artwork with Jimmy Abegg and Corey Basil. There's poetry in the film. It's kind of like this multimedia thing. Wow. That during the COVID lockdown or pandemic, we've made available as an e-course. 10-week long e-course, and there's like guided meditations on there, and some prayers and stuff like that, and and that's actually available at the moment for whatever people can pay. So if they can pay $0, they can have it. Wow. If they can pay $100, they can have it
right now. Like, if people that are listening right now, they're like, I need this right now. What do they do?
Yeah, just go to thebeatitudesproject.com.
Okay.
Thebeatitudesproject.com.
Love it. And also, we want to let our listeners know, if you're looking for the book, it's called Words from the Hill, An Invitation to the Unexpected by Stu G. So take advantage of that. That's really good stuff.
What has been some of the surprising things that have come out? You went on this journey, right, thinking it's going to be this book and CD, but what are some of the things that you have learned, and some of the things that have come out of this that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been a real journey of transformation, honestly. As I've kind of experienced the presence of God for myself, in my own sort of moments where I need to, just talk about poverty of spirit for a minute. That I talked about going to India, where there's like extreme poverty right in front of you. And I think, blessed are the poor. In fact, Luke says that, right? Yeah. But then Matthew says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And it's like, well, so what does that mean? Like, it kind of like when you have nothing left, when even you feel like your religion's let you down, like a spiritual poverty, right? And and there's people with clinical depression, and or you might have hit the bottom of an addiction, and just like you're not in when you feel like you've lost control, and there's nothing left, like the only thing that can help you is God's presence.
Yeah, right? Amen.
And so that's how I started to understand that. And so for myself, we're all at different levels. There's all different. No one's grief is worse than someone else's. So
Right.
someone during COVID, they might have lost someone, or there's a difficult way that it's difficult to kind of put a league table on grief.
Right.
It's just like your pain is your pain.
Yeah.
And so the idea of God being with you in that is incredibly hopeful to me.
And go on, Chuck. Go on.
Do you have obviously the Beatitudes Project is all encompassing, but is there one beatitude that you gravitate toward more than the others, like a favorite beatitude?
I mean, that would change on a daily basis if you asked me that question every day. But I'll tell you some highlights and then my journey with it. So, blessed are the peacemakers. What does peacemaking look like in this time? And I went to the Holy Land. I've been there 3 times now, where I talked to Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers. So I kind of fixed that chapter in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I've visited with, one day you'll go to the Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem. And then, I went to a Palestinian refugee camp on the same day. It's like a whiplash moment, right?
Yeah.
And so I went with an organization called the Telos Group that have become great friends. And so have some of these people over there. I mean, they're my heroes, honestly. But, in the book and in the film, we talk about the way that you make peace in a hotspot, in a violent hotspot, is the same as you make peace in your own places at home, whether it's a frosty relationship or whatever that is at work. It's about coming from behind our defenses and onto the contested space, and being willing to want for your adversary what you want for yourself. So the whole project starts with this idea of what does it mean to listen. And so peacemaking comes as we can listen to the other and begin to understand life from their perspective. So peacemaking is a big one. The blessed are the meek is a really important one for me. So meekness, we grew up in our sort of evangelical churches understanding meekness as strength under control. I believe that's the direct kind of Greek sort of translation. But when I was thinking about, so who are the meek in my neighborhood, I began to look at this idea of like power. What does power look like, and what do the overpowered, and then on the other side, what does the underpowered? Who are they? What does that look like? I have a friend who's a rabbi, and we talked for about 3 days about this, and we came up with this phrase that the meek are those whose presence is ignored, right? So who are the people in your neighborhoods whose presence is ignored? Perhaps it's the elderly couple down the road, or perhaps it's the mentally ill person, or the blind person or something, or perhaps it's your black neighbor, or perhaps it's your refugee neighbor, and
That's
so we looked at what it's like in the South here, amongst the African American community in Franklin, Tennessee, and then refugees in Nashville, Syrian refugees. I talked to a Muslim friend of mine who's a chef, and I reached out to the Islamic Center of Nashville. Like, what is it like? What's your story like growing up in the Bible Belt? Post 9/11 and in the age of ISIS. Like, how do we be good neighbors?
Wow.
So the initial conversation isn't about evangelizing them.
Right.
It's about how can we serve each other? Like, how can we live in the same place?
Wow. That opens a doorway to so many things, from serving one another to being a light as well but you going about it not where we're going to ram the gospel down your throat immediately.
Yes.
We want to get to know you. We want to hear your story. Yeah. And that is really.
Yeah. And if the gospel is that God loves us, then then by showing my love for my neighbor, I am representing the gospel.
Yeah, that's so good.
Very good. Wow. So this journey obviously as took you on, you mentioned going to the Holy Land, and is there, and I know the music side of things, because obviously you can't get away from that. You did an incredible job with the project, with this.
Thank you.
And you involved not only Amy, but a lot of other artists. Did they talk about being a part of this was actually impacting them as well?
Yeah, I think, with Amy, we were talking about, it wasn't the thing we ended up doing, which was mercy, but we were talking about, the hunger and thirst for righteousness. And I was talking about, the word that righteousness comes from in the Greek actually means righteousness and justice. So, if we start reading the Bible, and every time it says that in the New Testament, every time it says righteousness, if we add and justice, it kind of changes the way you think about it. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness and justice.
Wow,
right?
Game changer.
So for Amy, that was really inspiring. And so everyone I was more in a place of learning from them a lot of the time. So just to name a few folks that are on there, like Hillsong United, I wrote a song with Joel Houston. That was amazing. Martin Smith, we got back together to write a song called Holy Troublemakers. I wrote with a rap artist called Propaganda, and a young black artist called Terrian, who's now on the road with Toby Mac. But that's an amazing song. She grew up in the projects in Memphis, and so we wrote a song called "Let My Dreams Fly," which is a very kind of big nod towards Martin Luther King, obviously. And Matt Maher, Audrey Assad. With Audrey, we wrote this song for refugees, and I met this Syrian refugee family about a month or 2 months after they'd relocated to Nashville, and I met them through the Islamic Center of Nashville, and I sat in their living room. We played some music together, and I invited the son who played the drum, the tabla, and the oud, that kind of string instrument, to come and play on the record with Audrey. So, like 2 days later, he was in the studio with us, and it's just amazing, like the combination, and then of course my friend Marco W. Smith, he came, and it wasn't long after his father had died, and so we wrote a song with Ian Cron, actually, from who does the Enneagram stuff, and we wrote a song that was for his dad called Carry On. And All Sons and Daughters, Anthony Skinner. I mean, there's 13 different artists on this record.
Wow. You mentioned Michael. Obviously, we couldn't do this this conversation without talking about
friends.
Friends forever. But seriously, going from Delirious to Michael, obviously the same type of music but totally different feel. Was that hard for you?
It wasn't hard. It was there was a challenge there, because I had to suddenly learn some songs that were incredible and different. So, like for instance, we still do songs like Place in This World and Secret Ambition when we tour. Right. And so, one of the greatest guitar players in Nashville is Dan Huff. Right. And, so I have to play his parts every night because people want to hear those solos.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
and that's the hard thing. People know how they sound. It's not like with Delirious, you could create something and then you'll do it every night. With this, you've got to stay on. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So way back in the day, one of my favorite albums was Last of the Runaways, Giant, which is the Huff Brothers, right?
Wow. That's right. Yeah.
Man.
Wow. Yeah. Incredible music and an incredible player. My gosh. And so, you'll often see me if we have any time. I'm often just playing in the dressing room, practicing those solos and making sure my scales and my my fingers are moving. So it's it's a challenge or a stretch in the right way. Like, it's kept me doing fresh stuff for me, like to carry on learning. And I think that that, you know, I hope I never stop being challenged and learning like that.
Wow. Well, we are close to coming to the end of this conversation. One last question that I didn't ask Tim, I didn't ask Martin, but I'm going to ask you. What about a reunion?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I heard Martin say he's not incredibly nostalgic, and whereas I kind of am, you know. So I love what we did, you know, and I mean, I know he did too.
Yeah.
But I'm very fond, and I love looking back because I know how it formed me into, you know, the person I am today, and the fact that we got to do what we did was incredible, you know. And you know, worship has become a genre, and I'm not sure that we ever really intended that. Like we wouldn't have said that. I think, you know, once something becomes the thing, it ends up in a box or with walls around it, you know. And I think that we were totally expecting someone to take what we were doing and, you know, take it further. And, you know, people have done incredible stuff and we love it. You know, I love it. I love everything that Hillsong United have done and what Elevation and Bethel, you know, it's unbelievable what they're doing and stuff like that. But I would love to see, I know you asked me about a reunion, but I'm going to tell you what I'd love to see. I'd love to see bands of people and worship musicians kind of reigniting the prophetic imagination.
That's good.
That can imagine a better future, you know, like, which is what I've been trying to do with the Beatitudes Project personally. You know, it's like, let's make a better future than this divided country that we've got right now.
Right.
You know, and let's not try and, you know, bring Jesus and align him with what we think. You know, let's kind of align with this counterintuitive king and his kingdom, and go for a better day, like with our music as well as our lives. You know, and so I think we could do that. You know, but it probably needs other people. If Martin phoned today and said, "Should we do something?" I'd say yes. Right. But I couldn't speak for everyone. Yeah. So that's my answer.
So we need to get all of you on the podcast at the same time. And well, Stu, thank you so much for sharing your heart and taking your time to share a part of your story. And, you know, you mentioned Dan Huff, but I tell you what, there's a lot of people listening that they would list you. Yeah. And right. You're such a well-respected musician, guitarist, and we just want to thank you for your gift of writing and leading people into the presence of God. And I know there are people listening right now, they have dreams in their heart, and they look up to you, and they are wanting to be obedient, whether it's to write a project like the Beatitudes Project, whether it's to write a song or a worship album or to pick up the guitar. Can you pray for our listeners right now?
Yeah.
And I know that they'll be encouraged and blessed by that.
Yeah, Jesus, thank you for your presence right now. Thank you that wherever we are listening right now, you are with us. And we recognize you as the source of our lives. And we recognize you as the source of our gifts and the source of our inspiration. So, God, I pray for every budding musician out there, budding worship leader, budding filmmaker, budding poet, whatever, doctors, nurses, everyone, Lord, that you would draw close to us and that you would help us see the world the way that you see it. Yeah. Lord, let us want for our neighbors what we want for ourselves. Yes. And so, God, you are our promoter. You are the one that takes a song and let it be sung around the world. It's nothing that we can do other than just try our best and do our best work and learn our craft, you know. But we hold these empty vessels to you and say, you do what you will. And if that's not what I'm supposed to be doing, please open the door to something else. So God, thank you for your presence. Your presence is everything to us. And we're grateful and we love you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Stu. Well, we do something at the end of every show that is really just so that people can get to know you even a little bit more. Okay,
and have some fun.
It's called the Big Three. And so Chuck is going to start with the first question he's got. He's dug this out of the vault, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. My first question is, what was the first band T-shirt you felt super cool about wearing to school?
Oh, Queen. Yeah, so I never mentioned Queen, but they are the reason that I play music. Oh. So there was a tour called the Crazy Tour, and it was like 1978, 1979, and I never saw it, but I had a friend who went, and he brought me back a T-shirt, and I wore that thing out.
Wow,
for years.
And seriously, when Delirious came to Peoria, I always remember Stu watching the DVDs or VHS tape, however it was, before the events, just to get into that mindset.
Yeah.
And you got a chance to play with Mark Martel, who is involved with all the guys at Queen. How crazy was that?
It was actually brilliant. It gave me an excuse to get the Brian May guitar, and so I bought that, and yeah, it was crazy. I mean, his voice is so similar to Freddie's. It's unbelievable, and it was a real honor.
Wow.
We played "Somebody to Love," which is one of my favorite Queen songs. So
that's cool. That's good. Okay, the question I've got is if you had to have one meal left on this earth, you've got one meal to eat. What is it?
Oh my gosh, one meal. I would say my wife's steak and Guinness pie.
Oh man.
With roast potatoes, roast parsnips.
Man, talk about revival.
And beef gravy.
Sure, in the presence of God.
Full British right here, Stu. That's good. That's good. That's good. Last question, Chuck.
All right. The last question is this. If you could put something just crazy in your rider, obviously you've done a lot of tours playing with all the people we've mentioned. So if there was something that you could put on the rider, like green M&Ms, anything, and it would always be fulfilled, what would that item be?
It would be a dozen Callaway Chrome Soft golf balls.
Yes, I was not expecting that.
Is that because you lose a lot of golf balls, Stu? Oh, man. That's great.
Yeah, I just like collecting them.
Yeah. Well, my answer would be different. I think I keep losing them. I don't know.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, Stu, we thank you for being on Revival Town podcast today. And how can people get connected with you? I know you've mentioned about the Beatitudes Project website, social media, things like that. How can people really connect with you?
Yeah, Instagram, I'm on a lot. And so my handle is Stugio, Stugio. And that actually, like, people think that's to do with studio and they just put my G in it or whatever. It actually came from the golf course because one of my favorite golfers is Sergio Garcia. And we were on a tee one day and I was with my good friend Andy Hutch, who used to do the lighting for Delirious and videos and stuff like that. And he was like just teasing me like crazy before I was like, trying to put me off. And he was like, "Oh, come on, Stugio Garcia." So Stugio, that's where it comes from.
Wow, that's cool.
So Instagram is Stugio. Facebook is simply Stu G.
Great, and that's STUG.
STUG, yeah.
Great. And website, you mentioned Beatitude. Anywhere else?
TheBeatitudesProject.com. I mean, that keep on my socials for anything else. Right. But thebeatitudesproject.com. That's like, if there's one place to go, like, it's there, because like I said, people can pay whatever they want to pay for it right now, even if it's zero. And, I've really created this and in collaboration to help people, like we're so, there's not enough compassion and not enough mercy, not enough peacemaking in the world right now, and so I want to help people take steps towards that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Stu, for being on Revival Town podcast today. We really do appreciate it.
And next time we're talking
so
golf.
much.
Next time we're going to talk some golf.
Okay.
Next time you're back.
All right.
All right.
Well, Chuck, we are going to be talking with not just someone who has changed the worship scene globally, but also a friend of mine. And we've actually had his daughter on the show and his brother-in-law already in the last few months. We had Tim Jupp on just a few months back, and then Ellie Limebear was on. And we are so thankful and privileged to have Martin Smith with us today, who was the lead singer with Delirious from 92 to 2009. But then from there, has just been, he thought he was taking a little time off after that, but just has been tearing it up as doing solo stuff. He has written songs like I Could Sing of Your Love Forever, God's Great Dance Floor, Majesty, History Maker. I mean, we could go on and on. And yet today he has taken time. He's in the UK right now in Brighton, and he's taken time to be with us. Martin, it is great to be with you today.
Hey guys, how are you?
Oh, good. Thank you so much for taking time to hang with us.
Oh, it's amazing. Thanks for allowing me on. This is amazing.
Well, with technology now, we're able to do stuff like this, and the podcast we launched in November, and we've really been able to bring people on the show that have created movements throughout the world and are seeing things happen. And Martin, we go back a long way, and I could not have gone any further on this podcast without getting you on, and I wouldn't have heard the end of it if I hadn't have asked you to come on, and Ellie would have been on and not asked you. So
oh, amazing. No, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you.
Well, today we're going to step into the life of Martin Smith and what he has brought to the church globally. Martin, I know that these last few years have been a little bit different for you. For many years, you were part of a band that really changed music history within the church scene. I want to step back, if that's okay, and just talk about those early years. This podcast is called Revival Town Podcast, and we called that after a song that you wrote.
Yeah, the whole name inspired by your song.
I can't remember the last time we did the Revival Town song. I certainly haven't, I don't think, done that since the end of Delirious. But that really sums up, I think the world of Delirious was a bunch of young guys. We were passionate about God. We were passionate about our community. We were passionate about culture. We didn't just want to be, like a Christian band, although there's great things about that. We wanted to be the next Radiohead or the next U2 or the next other band that was out there. So that's where our heads were, if you can imagine that. And so we had this mix of wanting to engage in the culture we lived in, but also this faith of, if God steps into our life, into our streets, into our homes, into our communities, he can change everything. And it's something that never left us. It's never left me. The fact that the same God that led the Israelites out of the Red Sea is the same God that's alive in our lives today and can do anything. So hence Revival Town. Let's be in faith. Let's expect God to come in glory. And I guess every time we went out and played, we were carrying that theme. That was what we were carrying.
Yeah. And it really did hit the streets. I mean, the way you guys started back, in the parks, and just tell us a little bit about that. Just some of those early years, and even some of the things that happened to you that really sparked that band to, like, we got to take this even one more step. Tell us a little bit about Live and in a Can, for instance, is probably one of the best worship albums that has ever been made, Chuck. It's incredible. A lot of those early sounds are still being sung in churches today. I know I was at your church a few months back, and we were singing "Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble?" and
Obsession. Something that's still on our list. And Martin, I planted a church over 22 years ago, and all throughout the history of our church, we've sung your songs. So it's pretty cool to be looking at you today and listening to you.
But what was those early years like?
Yeah, the as I say, we were slightly naive. We were full of faith.
Yeah.
We were English.
Yeah.
I think that was part of who we were. To be fair, we weren't an American band on that circuit, and so I think we saw the world through slightly different eyes. We live on a small island in the UK. I mean, there are hardly any people that have made a living from Christian music in the UK.
Right.
It's a very small scene. There isn't really an industry, to be fair. And then suddenly, we're in America, in the great land of opportunity, and we're discovering, wow, there's radio stations, there's proper record companies, there's publishers, you can go on these huge outdoor shows, creation and festivals, and there's 80,000 people, and it just completely blew our minds. We were, at the time, simply leading a youth event called Cutting Edge for the kids in our town, in Littlehampton, on the south coast of England. 70 kids we started with, but we were seeing God do some miracles, and it grew and grew. And as you referred to earlier, we lived by the sea. Once a year, we would rent these kind of flatbed trucks, we used to call them. We'd set up on those, and we would set up on the sea, right? Not actually on the water, but just on the grass by the sea. And we would lead worship, and people just used to come from everywhere. And not just church people, but of course everyone's wandering past and thinking, wow, what on earth is all this going on about? We were baptizing kids were getting saved, but I think it was just the noise and the sound of abandoned worship is what I remember. Just the youth of Great Britain lifting up their eyes, lifting up their heads, lifting up their hands, and worshipping like it was the last night on earth.
Yeah. And you guys were doing that. Some of you guys were still having other jobs. This wasn't like full time on the early years. But then you had an incident that really shook you up when you were coming back from a gig in Lincoln. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that really was a pivotal point, I do believe.
Yeah, sure. We did have different jobs at the time. Stu G was an electrician. I think Tim ran a studio. Stu Smith was a designer. I was a sound engineer, started producing a bit. And I was at a conference, as you say, in Lincoln, which is in the north of England, recording a worship record for this conference. And my wife was with me, Anna. We'd only been married, a year. And we decided to travel back through the night because our little niece had been born, and we were going to go and see her in the hospital. And we had a bad car smash at like 3 a.m. I drove into a wall and nearly killed, it could have been quite fatal. And anyway, I broke my leg and got myself in a right old mess and spent some time in hospital. And it was while I was in there, well, a couple of things actually. While I was in hospital lying there, I wrote the song Obsession.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And then had started to have this sort of idea of, hey, you know, I've been given my life back. You know, what if we just left our jobs and just, you know, went full time in music? So one by one, as the guys would come in and visit me in hospital, it was like already I was like getting ready for the next season.
Wow.
And like, guys, what if we did this? What if we went for this? And it started an amazing journey of all the families and wives and having to sit down like, do I want to do this even? And can I do this? Can we support ourselves? Is God asking us to do this? And in the end, that was the birth of Delirious.
Wow. So it was really something that you thought could have ended everything, actually started everything, this car wreck.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like that's how it works, doesn't it? You there's normally a shock or a break in the system, which then makes you stop, rethink everything, and then that's usually where God gives you a new idea.
Yeah. And so from that, this new idea of, okay, let's do this full time, let's go for it, that then really started a lot of different things for you guys, because like you mentioned, the Christian music scene wasn't big in the UK, pretty much non-existent, and so you had to think differently about how you were going to reach that generation. And so it was, hey, we're going to play it to anyone, which got the Radio 1 and other major national radio stations listening. And tell us a bit about that, because that's different than over here where you do everything in the Christian world and hopefully you'll make it. Here, you're literally presenting the message of Christ in a way that is compatible, but also the message still gets out.
Yeah, and I think as well, as I referred to earlier on, I think being British gave us a different freedom and a license to go and be evangelists. And I think, you know, I can see sort of, if you're a band, you're church guys growing up in a church and you want to be a rock and roll band, you're always going to get people saying, whoa, you know, like that's the dark side. If you want to sort of be the Killers or be whoever it is, you know, mainstream, well, stay away from danger. And partly that's true, some of that. But I think that we just, as I said, we didn't have that frame here. And we were like, great, let's just, you know, if Radiohead can get on the radio, so can we.
Right. And that faith element.
We just believed in it so much, and we believed that God was on it. And also we wanted to sing, and this is really important, we were called to sing over people that would never come to church. And I think that was really at the heart of who Delirious were, was this: if we were worship evangelists, we wanted to be on the front of the army singing over our nation. And you never know, calling people back to Jesus. You know, I think we need that in the worship scene. We need the worship evangelists to not worry about Christian radio and worry about this and chart positions and publishing, but to go into the cities, go into the street and sing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a wonderful thing. And we did crazy stuff like we played shows in record stores. On a high street in London, and be thousands of people outside watching what was going on, and we're just singing about being history makers and the truth of standing up for truth. And we're in a high street in London with just people. It was great.
And it even led to like Wembley Stadium, right? You played the old Wembley Stadium and really saw this movement of worship, Chuck, that affected us here. But I know, Chuck, we were talking before, talking to Martin about just what it's like being a worshipper, and in that time you just hit it right on. It wasn't just about creating worship for the church. It was putting the worship out on the streets. And I think that's really
speaking the language of today. And as Andy was sharing, obviously you've played Wembley Stadium. You've done the big arenas. You've done on a flatbed by the sea. You've done all of this, right? So, and throughout the success of your career, I would think it would be easy at times to be distracted by the accolades, the affirmations of people. When you're writing to worship, you're writing to God, you're leading people into the presence of God. Was it tough sometimes to balance keeping the heart of worship, right? We sing the heart of worship. Was it easy to be distracted by the affirmations of people when ultimately you're playing to lead people into the presence of God in worship?
You know what? This answer might surprise you. You know, I've struggled with many different things over my life. Different things, but that has never been a struggle for me. I don't know why. I'm married to someone who would never allow any of that in our house anyway. And so, we've got a culture in our house that, you can play an arena, you can be a school teacher, you can be a nurse, it's all the same. We're all trying our best. I admire you guys. I admire Andy for all the work he's doing in Peoria. Unbelievable stuff for years and years. We're all on a level playing field.
Yeah.
So I've never really seen myself as that. And it's great, of course, at times when the work that you do is praised. As artists and creative people, you need that every now and again. You need to know that what you're doing is working.
Yeah.
I never really, got into that. And also, I'm not very nostalgic as a person. So I don't often look back and sit in my room and go, oh, how wonderful was that? I mean, I only talk about it when I do these sorts of things.
Right.
Sure.
So I don't really live in the past. There's a lot happening today which is equally as exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to God for it. But, there's a new song to write, and I think that thing in me that was always pressing on always trumped the feeling of, aren't we amazing?
Yeah. And Chuck, I'm going to tell you a story, and I don't think Martin has ever heard this story, just because it was something that happened in our family while we were visiting Martin and his family at his home. The first time we ever went to visit Martin, he wasn't living where he's living now in Brighton. He was in Littlehampton. And one of the afternoons, he said, hey, let's go down to our beach hut. They have this little beach hut right on the beach there. And it's where really they store all, surfboards and things like that. And he has a guitar in there, obviously, and there's tea and, all this. So we went down there, and my Joy, she was very young at that time. I don't know, probably 5, 6, something like that. And we'd had a good afternoon on the beach, and it's a pebbly beach down there, so there's not much sand. But I remember I had taken the boys to the ocean side, and we had walked back up. And as I came back up, Joy was on Martin's lap, and he had his guitar, and he was just singing a song with Joy. And I remember going, here's a guy who a few years back was playing to 80,000 people with Bon Jovi, but yet he's got time to just sing a song to my daughter. That's exactly what he's talking about when it comes to, it's not about the accolades and things like that. And a moment in time that we'll remember, our family will definitely remember.
Absolutely. Something very special. Shows your heart, Martin. And in fact, just last night I was on the treadmill listening to the entire Iron Lung album, and great stuff, by the way, loved it. And I found myself, I went from running to just to worshiping, and the song Rise Up was on, and I just had my hands up. I'm on the treadmill, and I'm worshiping just in the presence of God in my garage. And it got me thinking about worship and the importance of the presence of God. And as a pastor, just even a few weeks ago, I was on a 5-week preaching sabbatical, and I showed up for one of the services, and I was just standing in the back worshiping and watching. And in the service that I was in, I was surprised by, for a moment, just the lack of engagement, the lack of people worshiping, and it did something in my heart. And I talked about it with our staff and our team, even our worship pastor, like, man, we have got to be in the presence of God. Yeah. And we've just, and we can't live without being in the presence. And obviously worship goes way beyond just 4 songs before a message. But how important is the presence of God to you?
I mean, you know, who are we? You know, who are we without his presence? We're just smoke and bones, aren't we?
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
I think, I mean, I'm deeply passionate about that idea that wherever you are, you know, whether you've got the bright lights on a stage, or you're in your beach hut, or you're, you know, in the depths of despair, you can always lift your head, can't you? You know, Psalm 121, I lift my eyes to the mountains. You know, where does my help come from? It comes from, you know, the maker of heaven. We can always lift our head and find him. And I guess that is at the heart of, you know, worship. When we come together, we sing, or sit in silence, or kneel, or pray, or lift our hands, or wave, or run around, or dance, or give away some money, or cook some food for some people. You know, you've just sensed that God himself is in the middle of all those things, and is attracted to those things. And so he's never far away, is he? Never far away. And I hope, you know, in our sort of postmodern church culture, that we never lose that. You know, someone said to me the other day, you know, one of the issues they had with kind of maybe a younger generation is that you know, we're more passionate about the process of worship rather than the person of worship.
That's good.
So you know, our call to worship is, you know, a great in-ear mix with a click, with great arrangements, big fat snare, and it's all sounding brilliant. Now, all of that stuff I love, right. You know. So I'm not saying that's bad, but when it's the call to worship, that's where we're on tricky ground. So, you know, if we walk into a church and, you know, we're just about our stuff, suddenly there's like, you know, I was like, oh great, that's my call to worship.
Right.
But you know, it's not.
Right.
And our call to worship is that first breath in the morning, isn't it?
Yes.
You know,
yes.
You know, we awake, we lift our head and go, wow, I'm still alive. Thank you, God. You know, and you know, Andy looks in the mirror and says, wow, I'm so gorgeous.
You better believe it.
Yeah, squib.
How did I get so good looking?
Oh man!
When I get up in the morning, my wife looks at me and goes, "What a plonker."
Yeah.
So you, I mean, obviously, Delirious did come to an end in 2009, but that wasn't the end. That actually, for you, I think, was a starting point. Yeah, you took a little bit of time off to be with the kids. You have 6 kids. and amazing kids. Obviously, we've talked about Ellie, that's already starting to do worship, but a lot of your kids are doing music. I know Levi's phenomenal guitarist. I know Noah's launching stuff as we speak. Just a lot of stuff going on. But for that time after Delirious, you just felt it was time to just pause a little bit. It wasn't too long though before you started really writing and doing solo projects. How was that compared to being with four guys, three of them being family members, to now having to not recreate, that's the wrong word. Look at music differently with new, young, fresh band members, trying to get the music out because something was in you wanted to get out. Was that a different process than the early years starting Delirious?
Yes, it was. I would look back on that season as not being very easy. I think it was quite a difficult time. When you step out of something that is so fantastic, and I have to say that it was the most amazing team to be a part of. The caliber of people that I was around, they were all amazing. And we had this common dream, and when you have a common vision where people pull together for the same thing, there's literally no limits, Right. The sum of all the parts is so much greater, and you cannot you can't know that unless you've been in a band or a great team or run a great company, that incredible dynamic of people coming together. So I did miss that.
Yeah.
And I would say I still miss that. And when I talk to the guys and Stu G, and that's the first thing, like I miss that feeling. But the travel was so intense, and I had young kids growing up. Noah, who's our number 2, was about to become a teenager, and I just kind of had that thing of, look, I have a feeling that we're right on the edge of what we can cope with here, and I felt the release to, that assignment for me was over, and it was a very painful year. To end something that's so great is never ever going to be easy. Right. It just won't be.
And with having family involved as well, probably that added even more weight to it. Yeah,
and that's right. You get the blessing and the difficulty of that. You're all so close, and you're all at church together. You're all at Sunday lunch together, kids' birthday parties together.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a sort of that much of a degree of separation. But we've lived through that and fought for that, and everyone's in a good place now. But it did leave a void, and it took me quite a long time to even get to the place where I wanted to get in the studio and write. It was just an exhausting situation, and I just needed time out.
Yeah. So during that time out, obviously, were you still writing, or was it like, I'm just taking a breather from everything musically, or was there anything that came out of that time, like a groan-in or anything, but that now is out, or was it like, I just need a break?
Yeah, I think it was a bit like that. I just went underground for a bit, I just wanted to enjoy, being at home.
Yeah.
And just doing ordinary stuff, and wasn't so concerned about making a record or writing songs at that time. I did get involved with a guy that you know, Tim Hughes.
Yeah.
And a great friend of mine, and we started writing together. So that helped me, you know.
Yeah.
And that was a mutual thing. And then it ended up producing his record during that first year. So that was a good thing. But, you know, if anyone's gone through the end of something or winding something down or stepped away from something, you know, you do need that period of time of transition to not rush into the next stage, but, you know, wait on God and wait for the next assignment, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So Martin, what is your process or routine for writing a record? Is it the same process for every time you write, or is it different?
I enjoy the collaboration. So, you know, most of the songs are co-written with one or two other people. Iron Lung, you know, the reason that's got a bit more of a band feel to it is because the guys in my band, in my team, you know, we took half of those songs, you know, started on the floor, and that's a term that we say, you know, when we're all gathered in the studio floor together. You know, that can be a great writing experience. Some people don't like that, but I like that. And so, you know, we formed a lot of those songs. Everybody Is Broken, you know, Fire's Gonna Fall, came out of jamming together.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So that was exciting. Other songs, you know, were written with completely different people outside of the mix, and that was fine as well. But I am proud of it. You know, commercially, it may not have kind of really impacted the scene, but you know, I'm proud of it, and you know, it might be something that just takes a while to burn. You know, it might get there in the end.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned just then about collaboration, and during this season, with what's going on with the pandemic, and the UK, Chuck, has really been hit very hard. Just to try and give a bit of perspective, the UK is about the size of Illinois. Okay, so England, Wales is about the same size as Illinois, and they've just gone over 100,000 deaths in the UK. So if you could imagine that in Illinois, that really does bring it into perspective.
Absolutely.
And I do believe you guys are still on lockdown. Is that correct, Martin?
Yeah, that's correct. We can go walking with one person out in the fields, or you know, on the street, just with one other person, 2 meters distance, but we're not allowed anybody in our house. And we can go and get food and groceries and shopping, but pubs are shut and restaurants are shut.
Yeah.
You know, all the stores are shut, and so we and our kids are homeschooling.
Right.
So schools are shut at the moment, and we're looking at reopening in April.
Wow.
So it's extraordinary, isn't it? And this is the second lockdown we've had. Yeah. So it's very unusual.
I did see though on your Instagram that you've started jumping on the water a little bit with what do they call that, Martin? What are they called? Paddleboard?
There's a big craze here called paddleboarding.
Yeah.
And it's like a surfboard but inflatable. So you can pump air into it, you know, and then it becomes this surfboardy type thing. And then we paddle out on the sea, and we love that. I mean, the sea at the moment is freezing cold.
I was just about to say, it's not like we're not in the south of France type of thing here.
No, this is not Hawaii. But it's part of our lockdown, like keeping us sane, is that we go out and you know, we'll even swim in the cold water just to sort of keep us alive, you know.
Now you do have wetsuits on, right? That is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you're always writing, and you're always probably jotting down song ideas. What's next for Martin Smith?
Good question. Well, what's come out of lockdown for me is still, you still wake up in the morning with a desire to want to sing for people or sing over people or keep leading people. Our church has been shut for a long time now. So I've started to, lead a little bit of worship from my home here, and it's firstly into an iPad, and then I started to film them a bit better and sending those to different churches around the world, just so it sort of keeps them going, just a 20-minute set just to put in their online service. So that's been good, and then it developed into, well, what if I made these available to everyone? And so hence the birth of Glowworks TV, which is what I've called it. And you can go on glowworkstv.com. You can download worship sets, not just myself, but collaborations with many different worship leaders that you know and love, mostly from the UK at the moment, because obviously we can't travel.
Right.
But no, we've got stuff from Colombia coming in soon, and Brazil and Eastern Europe, and just trying to make it sort of a place where people can go and find stuff that they can use online. So that's what we've been doing.
Love it. So what advice would you give to young worship leaders, worship pastors, or really next generation of musicians and worshipers? I mean, your daughter is leading the charge, and so what advice would you have for those who are listening today that are involved in worship?
Well, I think mainly, we've got to be ourselves, haven't we? You're uniquely made. We're all uniquely made, and so the way we lead is going to be unique. And I think we must resist the temptation to copy different people or styles, or even songs. Like if I string those 4 songs together that are popular, then we're going to have a great worship show today. But be yourself. Experiment. Just be creative. But most of all, love your people. You can't lead worship for people that you don't really love. I'm not meaning on a tour around the. I'm meaning in your home church. You got to love your people, and they will know if you do or don't.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I think it's important that we don't. It's not just a job, is it? We open up our homes. We have people over to eat food, and just be with us, and we live our lives out on the outside. So that's important. No secrets.
Yes.
Don't have any shadows in your life that people can go, oh, I'm not sure about that guy. Looks like he's hiding something, or try and keep your hands clean and your heart pure. Psalm 24. Of course, it's hard, easier said than done.
Right.
But let's attain to that, and just lead your people with honesty and integrity and humour, and if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter, does it?
Right.
We're in the presence of God. He's our Father. He's not that worried if we mess up. So, yeah.
That's good.
That's good. Well, Martin, we're coming close to the end here, and every conversation we have with different individuals, we always ask them to just pray for people who may be listening. You may have been listening today. You may be in the middle of lockdown, and just hearing Martin talking about how they've had to handle it, and how trying to think creatively to worship and to obviously stay connected with people. You may be there going, yeah, that's me. Martin, could you just pray into this time, and especially those who may find it hard to worship at this time?
Absolutely.
During lockdown or during churches that are closed? Could you pray to that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Father God, we thank you for who you are. And when our life seems to be a little chaotic or unsure, or we feel that the earth beneath us is moving a bit and we're insecure, we know that you're a God who never changes, that you're the same yesterday, today and forever, and we do trust you. You're the God who, you know, who led the Israelites out of Egypt. You did so many miracles. You gave them manna in the morning. You healed the blind person. You have done so many incredible things, and so we do trust you. We do trust you. And right now we just receive your presence. Come, Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Come upon all of us, and wherever we are, we know that you are with us and you will never abandon us. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Man, that was good.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much.
We are going to do something right now coming out of that we do every week, Martin, and this has got nothing to do with what we just talked about.
But we love what we just talked about, and thank you for sharing your heart and speaking into us and our listeners and praying for our listeners. So, in fact, we should probably have him share how can people connect with him?
Yeah.
You know, especially for somebody that might be from a younger generation. This is the first time they've been introduced to Martin. Martin, how can our people connect with you?
Well, I think you could go on Instagram and maybe follow me on Instagram, which is Martin Smith TV, and that will be one way. I think that's probably the only way, really. And again, the glowworkstv.com. You can have a look on that website and see if there's anybody that you know that can do that subscription for a church that doesn't have cameras and a media team. So yeah,
it's a great resource.
That'd be great. It'd be nice to stay in touch.
Yeah, Chuck, it is amazing what Martin's talking about. Basically, he's created worship sets for churches who perhaps they can't get their musicians together, maybe they can't get into their building. You can bring those live worship sets into their service anywhere in the world. And some of the people that he's talking about that has joined him aren't just guys that are doing stuff now. I mean, he's had Graham Kendrick joining him. Obviously, Ellie has joined him a few times. So it's been really good. And I've got family members who have churches who have been using this in the UK and have just found it an incredible resource. So if you're listening and you're like, we're struggling with worship, this is a great way. And it doesn't have to end when everything goes back to normal, because this is a great resource for small groups, youth groups, things like that. So.
Absolutely. Well, we had Austin Savage on the podcast, the director of 95 Network, and 95% of churches in the United States are 500 people or less, Martin. So this is a great resource for pastors that are struggling to have a worship team. So excellent.
Yeah.
So glowworks.com.
Yeah. So
Glowworks TV.
Glowworks TV. All right.
Yeah. I got to correct him all the time, man. I'm sorry.
Us deaf people, we can't get anything right.
All right, let's go with the three big questions. Chuck, do you want to start with one?
Yeah, all right, here we go, Martin. The big three. The very first question I have for you is, if you could co-write a song with anyone who is alive, who would it be?
Oh, great question. Chris Martin.
Oh, right. Now that would be a good collaboration.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Why'd you say that, Martin? What do you like about him?
Well, the urban myth, and apparently it's true, is that when we were playing in his city that he was in, I think it was Exeter, I think he was where he lived, he was 16 and he came to see us play.
Wow.
And I've heard from a few sources that he really liked the King of Fools record.
Wow.
And that, so I think there's a connection there,
Yeah.
His mum is an amazing Christian lady, and so there's a great, there's an anointing on his life. He's a worship leader, isn't he?
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Hopefully, that'd be great to do that one day.
And you've had a few run-ins with Marcus Mumford as well, is that correct?
Just a couple of occasions. A great guy, and amazing what they've done. And,
that'd be a great collaboration right there.
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah. All right, I've got a question. What is the funniest bus or tour bus story that you've got?
I can remember, in every tour bus there's like a section of the roof that slides back, like a sunroof we call it, where you can put your head out the top, Yeah. But really you should only do that when the bus is stationary, when you're actually parked up. But I remember one of our crew, we were driving, I don't know, across America somewhere, and we had this we were getting a bit bored, and we had this bright idea, let's open up the roof and like stick our heads out, and anyway, we were driving along innocently, like, hey, this is amazing, and then someone from the front of the bus shouted, get your head down, and anyway, we went into this tunnel. And we all sort of took a deep breath and expected this guy's head to sort of roll across the floor, having been chopped off. But thankfully, he snuck in just at the right time.
Yeah,
that's funny.
That would have been a bad story.
Was that the inspiration with the title King of Fools?
Hey, I do have a funny bus story, if Martin doesn't mind me sharing it, because it was one of the funniest things that I've experienced in all the bands that have come to Peoria. The day that Martin and the guys, I think it was the second time they came to the church, they'd done the event, and we went back on their bus because our kids were hanging out with their kids. And that day, Chris Tomlin and the Passion guys had just bought out a new live worship CD from their events, right? And Tomlin was a few years into it. People were really getting into him. And so we walk on, and I had told Martin, I said, hey, Tomlin's done one of your songs, Our God Reigns. And he's like, oh, bring it. And a typical musician, it's just like 12:30 at night. Bring it on the bus. We're going to play it. So we go on the bus, we put it on and start this song. And so Martin turns around and goes, hey, Tomlin's got this new CD out. Listen to this. Listen to this. They play Our God, and they start the CD with Our God Reigns. And I'll always remember Becca, who is Tim's wife. We had Tim on the show.
Yeah.
She was sitting in the corner looking really puzzled. And she turned to Martin and said, how is this new? Because I've heard this before, but I don't know where I've heard it from. and Martin goes, I wrote it. We sing it.
Oh, it's good to have wives, isn't it, that are completely disinterested. It's a healthy thing, isn't it?
Last question.
All right, last question. Yeah. If a label approached you, Martin, and they said, okay, Martin, you have free reign, pick any genre to do this album, besides worship, besides pop rock, make a record, what genre are you going to choose?
I'd love to make a record like Kanye's.
Really?
Like a Jesus is King type record. Yeah. With just that vibe, that spoken word thing.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I do like that. Whether my kids would think that was completely ridiculous might be another thing. But I love all that stuff.
That's good. Well, Martin, we want to thank you for being with us today. I know people are going to really enjoy hearing this, and I appreciate not just you musically, but we go back and we've had some great laughs, and I know we'll have plenty more along the road. But I just wanted to thank you for being on Revival Town podcast today.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. What an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Revival Town Podcast. Make sure you're following us on social media and remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, head on over to revivaltownpodcast.com.